Chapter 2759. Fine. Since you didn't come out, then don't blame this young master for being ruthless. Xiao Hua said coldly. This young master saw that you didn't take advantage of the opportunity to sneak attack us while we were looking at the scenery. That's why I called out. Saying this, Xiao Hua waved his hand, but in the horizon, in the dark blue night sky, there were many dark clouds that came out of nowhere. Good method. Your Excellency must be the thunder-controlling sect Xiao Hua, who is known as the terrifying phoenix. A voice came from the foot of the mountain that was dozens of zhong away. A swordsman wearing a dark red sword robe strangely flashed in midair, and this person's face was filled with unconcealable astonishment. Seeing this swordsman quietly approaching, Li Zongbao and the others were startled, but when they saw that this swordsman was actually at the second grade of the illusory sword realm, they unconsciously understood. Let them all show themselves. Xiao Hua said coldly, since they are all here, why hide? Do you think this is interesting? The swordsman stood in midair, his eyes shining brightly in the night, like flashing sword splendor. His gaze was clearly somewhat pensive, as if he was considering whether Xiao Hua was bluffing or not. However, Xiao Hua was impatient. He pointed his finger and said, You, it's only 3 people. Do you think this young master can't detect you? When the swordsman heard this, he was extremely astonished, even more so than when he was discovered by Xiao Hua. He waved his hand and said somewhat helplessly, Cheng Zhan, Cheng Jian, Cheng Ming, you all come out. In the place that Xiao Hua had just pointed at, a few faint lights flashed in the air. 3 swordsmen of the same height and height, wearing the same sword equipment, and even their appearances were exactly the same. They appeared there with the same stunned expression. Your Excellency, how did you discover us 3 brothers? The swordsman closest to Xiao Hua looked at Xiao Hua inconceivably and unexpectedly asked. This Xiao found you. Do I have to tell you how I found you? Xiao Hua looked at the 4 people and said indifferently, You all called out this Xiao's name. Don't tell me you don't want to tell me your name. This sword is Cheng Zhan. The swordsman who spoke cupped his fist and said, I am Cheng Jian, I am Cheng Ming. The other 2 shouted in unison. As for the swordsman who appeared first, he cupped his hands and said, I am Qi Chengyi from the 7 Spirit Mountain. 7 Spirit Mountains? Hearing this, Xiao Hua unconsciously frowned. He immediately thought of Ji Yi from the 7 Extremes Mountains. Have you seen a disciple of my 7 Spirit Mountain? Qi Chengyi asked with a smile when he saw Xiao Hua frown. No. Xiao Hua faintly shook his head. This Xiao is merely a foundation establishment cultivator. If I had met many experts, how could I still stand here steadily? What are you trying to achieve by hiding here? Li Zongbao was slightly impatient as he raised his voice and asked. You must be Li Zongbao from the Utopia faction, Qi Chengyi said with a smile. Then, he glanced at Fairy Hongxia and Xiao Maro, who were standing beside Xiao Hua. The 4 of you who made great contributions in the great battle of Dao and Sword have all come to my sword domain. I would like to ask what your intentions are. What intentions can I have? Xiao Hua shrugged and pointed to the sky. He smiled and said, This Xiao and the others have long heard of the countless wonders of Heng country. Taking advantage of the end of the battle, we specially came to Heng country to travel. Could it be that you think that we Foundation Establishment cultivators have some ulterior motives? Foundation Establishment cultivators? Qi Chengyi sneered. In the current sword domain, any swordsman would shudder at the mention of the terrifying phoenix. If you were to be treated as Foundation Establishment cultivators, you would be able to easily defeat them. If you think of us as Foundation Establishment cultivators, then wouldn't we all be blind? However, Qi Chengyi immediately raised his head to look at the sky and sighed. Although the extreme magnetic ray is a famous scenery in my sword domain, if not for fate, you won't be able to see it. Even this Qi has not appreciated it for many years. You are really lucky to be able to see such a wonderful scenery as soon as you enter my sword domain. However, it's a pity that the swordsmen of my sword domain have sacrificed their lives to protect such a homeland. Yet, it's still difficult to ensure the safety of our sword domain for a few years. Extreme magnetic ray. This is the extreme magnetic ray? Hearing this, Xiao Hua's heart trembled slightly. Your words seem to be wrong. Without waiting for Xiao Hua to speak, Fairy Hong Xia retorted sarcastically, the sword Dao war was started by sword cultivators. If not for your wild ambitions of invading our 3 cultivation kingdoms, who would have the patience to start a war with you? Now that the war has been going on for close to 10 years, there are countless casualties. The number of Dao sect cultivators who have fallen in the war is in the hundreds of thousands. Don't these cultivators like this beautiful scenery? Don't these cultivators want to protect the safety of our 3 cultivation countries? Unfortunately, they are cultivators and not ordinary people. Since they have stepped into the ranks of cultivators, they should sacrifice their lives for our Dao sect's foundation. What do you mean by saying these words in front of us? No other reason. It's just a random thought. Qi Chengyi actually smiled slightly and stopped arguing with Fairy Hong Xia. If there's nothing else, this Xiao and the rest will continue on, Xiao Hua said indifferently. Naturally, this Qi came here for a reason. Qi Chengyi said with a smile, as if the other party was not a hostile opponent. What? Finally going to make a move? Xiao Hua stretched lazily and said with a smile. Of course not. Qi Chengyi shook his head and said, this place is my sword domain and is already inside the sword tomb. You all have already escaped from the Dao sword war. How can this Qi face you all as enemies? Oh, you actually know that we don't need to participate in the war. So that's how it is. Xiao Hua suddenly realized that the flying sword message sent by the sword transformation swordsman was not for the patrolling disciples of the sword tomb, but for the tool cultivator of the 7 spirit mountains. He did not know what kind of medicine this tool cultivator was trying to sell. Qi Chengyi slapped his hand and a scarlet gold flying sword flew out from his storage bag. He waved his hand and the flying sword slowly flew in front of Xiao Hua and said, this is my 7 spirit mountains sword invitation. This Qi represents my 7 spirit mountains sect master to invite you to the 7 spirit mountain. Oh, inviting us to the 7 spirit mountain? Xiao Hua was stunned. He waved his hand and took the flying sword into his hand and carefully examined it. This flying sword was completely scarlet gold and had complicated sword patterns engraved on it. The word 7 Spirit Mountain could be faintly seen on the sword patterns. That's right. Qi Chengyi saw Xiao Hua take the sword invitation and said with a smile, my 7 Spirit Mountain has a great formation called the Brahma Pagoda. This Qi has long heard that the Dao sect's cultivators are skilled in formations. During the Battle of the Sword Tomb, they laid down the 10-direction annihilation great formation and caused the deaths of many of my sword domain's disciples. Therefore, my 7 Spirit Mountain boldly invites you to come to the 7 Spirit Mountain and give us some pointers on the Brahma Pagoda great formation. Is there something wrong with you? Xiao Hua wasn't polite at all, as if he didn't treat Qi Chengyi as an illusory swordsman. We only came to the Hung country to travel and broaden our horizons. Why would we go to the 7 Spirit Mountain for no reason? We're living happily now and haven't gotten tired of living yet. You don't dare. Cheng Ming sneered at the side. This Cheng has heard of the frightening phoenix's name for a long time, but I never thought that the frightening phoenix wouldn't even have the guts to go to my 7 Spirit Mountain. This Cheng is really disappointed. What does it have to do with me whether you're disappointed or not? What does it have to do with you whether I'm brave or timid? Xiao Hua didn't seem to be fooled. He flung his sleeve, and the flying sword flew back into Qi Chengyi's hand. He said, this Xiao has no interest in giving others pointers on formations. If there's nothing else, this Xiao will take his leave. Please wait a moment. Qi Chengyi wasn't surprised. He hurriedly waved his hand and said, you should take a look at the sword invitation first. It won't be too late to refuse. I won't look. Xiao Hua said coldly. Even if there's a method for me to immediately become an immortal, this Xiao still won't look. There's naturally no method for becoming an immortal. Qi Chengyi hurriedly said. However, there's a secret technique for refining spirit tools inside. Spirit tools? When Xiao Hua heard this, astonishment appeared on his face. His eyes turned a few times, and he began to ponder. Ever since he met Ji Peng, Xiao Hua had been reflecting on various aspects. Among them, he had already listed the Dharma treasures as his #1 priority. However, If he wanted to find a Dharma treasure that suited him, it would be extremely difficult. Now, the weapon cultivator of Seven Spirit Mountain was actually offering the method for refining spirit tools that Xiao Hua wanted the most. How could he not be tempted? Forget it. Xiao Hua had some calculations in his mind, but his face was full of disdain. He waved his hand and said, "Where in the world would there be spirit herbs that would be delivered to your doorstep? Not to mention that this Xiao doesn't know how to refine weapons. The secret technique for refining spirit tools is useless. Even if this Xiao knew how to refine weapons, I'm only at the foundation establishment stage. How could I refine spirit tools? Hehe, although this sir doesn't know how to refine spirit tools today, you can't guarantee that you won't in the future." Qi Chengyi laughed. Furthermore, this sir will give this secret technique to the Imperial Thunder Sect's elders. Do you need me to point out the benefits you'll receive? I'm not going. Xiao Hua flatly refused and waved his hand. Seven Spirit Mountain is the foundation of weapon cultivators like you. This Xiao will definitely not walk into a trap. How about this? Qi Chengyi thought for a moment and said, if this sir really doesn't want to go to Seven Spirit Mountain, then, this Qi will place the Brahma Pagoda array 100 miles away. It will be right next to your travel route. What do you think, sir? When Xiao Hua heard this, he couldn't help but frown as if he was thinking. However, he had already secretly released his Buddhist awareness. After a moment, Xiao Hua sighed and said, this Xiao and the others are only here to travel. Why do you have to make such a big fuss over nothing? That senior Huajian, isn't he being too careful? Since this sir already knows, then this Qi won't say anything more. Qi Chengyi was indeed straightforward and replied without hiding anything. Actually, apart from Senior Huajian's instructions, this Qi has another plan. Oh, what plan? Xiao Hua asked curiously. I heard that this sir managed to escape from the battle at Mount Quanjin. I presume you've seen sword friends Ling Yunwu and Uwan? Qi Chengyi replied with a question. What about it? So what if I've seen them? So what if I haven't? Xiao Hua replied ambiguously. -11. Chapter 2760. Ling Yunwu's sword pouch and the Ling Feng sword sect's sword scroll. If you have them in your storage pouch, please return them to my sword domain. Qi Chengyi finally got to the point. Hehe, this Xiao finally understands. Xiao Hua laughed when he heard this and replied, you all are still trying to set this Xiao up. You actually gave me a sword array that I have never seen before and asked me to break it. This so-called secret technique of refining spiritual weapons, and this sword pouch are the stakes. If I can break the Fan Pagoda's array, then the secret technique is mine. If I can't break the array, then shouldn't I hand over the sword pouch? That's right, that's the case. Qi Chengyi admitted frankly, to be honest, this sword pouch is very precious. After the array was broken, we sword cultivator disciples searched for it with all our might. However, we couldn't find any trace of it. Even Ling Yunwu and the rest's flying swords couldn't be found. Thus, I thought of you. If you really have it, then this bet is actually quite fair. Fair my ass. Fairy Hong Xia was furious and pointed her finger. You guys set up the array and let Xiao Hua break it alone. Even if he is powerful, how can he be a match for hundreds of people? Hehe, I have already considered this matter. Qi Chengyi smiled and said, my Seven Spirit Mountains Fan Pagoda array is formed by at least 81 disciples. Fairy Hong Xia, Li Zongbao and Xiao Maro can all enter the array. Furthermore, my sword domain's swordsmen are very particular about fairness. Among the 81 disciples, other than the 9 who are grade 1 illusory sword disciples, the rest are all drawing sword disciples. Xiao Hua is able to fight against Qin Jian. I believe that against a few grade 1 illusory sword disciples, he won't be at a disadvantage, right? Don't listen to his nonsense. Fairy Hong Xia pulled Xiao Hua's arm and said, he said that there are 81 disciples. Who knows how many there are in the array? There might even be illusory sword disciples. Xiao Hua looked at Qi Chengyi, then at Cheng Zhen and Cheng Jian, who had been silent all this while. He seemed to be thinking about something. After all, Xiao Hua had fought with Ji Yi of the Seven Spirit Mountain before. He had a very good impression of the magnanimous Ji Yi, and he also had a good impression of the Seven Spirit Mountain. In addition, Qi Changyi and the other three were only covering their tracks and didn't take advantage of the fact that Li Zongbao and the others were immersed in the beautiful scenery to make a sudden move. Xiao Hua already believed most of Qi Changyi's words. How many people can the Brahma Pagoda's Great Array formation hold? Xiao Hua suddenly asked. 360 people. Qi Changyi hesitated for a moment before replying, however, I heard that this isn't the limit of the Brahma Pagoda's array. As for the maximum number of people, I'm not too sure. How can this Xiao believe that your secret technique can refine spirit artifacts? Xiao Hua asked again. When Qi Changyi saw this, he was overjoyed. He pointed at the small sword floating in front of him, and the small sword flew back to Xiao Hua. He said, in order to show my Seven Spirit Mountain's sincerity, there is a short description of the secret technique inside. I don't know if you can take a look at it. All right. Xiao Hua waved his hand, and the flying sword fell into his hand. After he immersed his divine telekinesis in it and carefully examined it for a moment, Xiao Hua clapped his hand, and the flying sword fell into his space. Good. You have guts. Qi Changyi's face was once again filled with astonishment. He raised his right thumb and said, You are indeed worthy of being called the terrifying phoenix. This Qi is truly inferior to you. There's no need to flatter this Xiao. Xiao Hua clapped his hand, took out the sword pouch, and waved it in front of Qi Changyi. He said, The sword pouch is right here. If this Xiao can't break the array, then this sword pouch will belong to the Seven Spirit Mountain. Good. Qi Changyi clapped his hands and said, This Qi will immediately return and set up the Brahma Pagoda's Great Array formation. I will quietly wait for you to break the array. After he finished speaking, Qi Changyi did not say anything else. He quickly led Cheng Ming and the rest into the distance. Darling Xiao. When there were sword cultivator disciples just now, Fairy Hongxia did not ask much. After Qi Changyi left, she hurriedly said, Won't it be fine if we don't go? Their Brahma Pagoda's Great Array formation has 9 illusory sword first-grade swordsmen and 72 drawing sword swordsmen. You and I together only have 4 people. How can we be a match for their array formation? Li Zongbao looked at Xiao Hua and did not ask anything. Sigh, since it's an order from the transforming swordsman, if you and I don't go through this sword array, how can we pass through the Huan country? Xiao Hua sighed and said, Even if we hide from the 7 Spirit Mountain, there are still the 8 Spirit Mountain and the 6 Spirit Mountain behind us. We will never have an end. Why don't we take this opportunity to break this bullshit Brahma Pagoda's Great Array formation in one fell swoop? That's not all. Li Zongbao added, although I can't see what's happening 100 miles away, since Qi Changyi has already said so, perhaps they didn't plan to invite us to 7 Spirit Mountain at all. Perhaps they've already set up a large formation 100 miles away and are waiting for us to arrive. In such a situation, junior sister, do you think we should fight or hide? Of course we have to fight. Fairy Hongxia pondered for a moment before she raised her voice and said, Since we are here, we are the representatives of Dao sect. Even if our lives are in danger, we must go. We must not disgrace Dao sect. If she said too much, Xiao Hua might even get sick of it. Now that she said it in front of Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao, it would make Xiao Hua lose face. However, Li Zongbao was someone that Xiao Hua respected, and Xiao Mao was Xiao Hua's brother. Their words should be more likely to enter Xiao Hua's ears than her. This was also Fairy Hongxia's good intentions and exhaustion. That's right. Li Zongbao clapped his hands and said, These words. Previously, Master kept saying them in my ears. Although I did not mind, I had no choice but to obey. Now that I heard junior sister say it again, I really understand Master's painstaking efforts. This bearing is not something one is born with, nor is it something that can be born with the increase of one's cultivation level. It still needs to be nurtured in the details. Previously, I agreed with junior brother Xiao's escape plan. Although it was a wise move, it was harmful to the cultivation of a master's bearing. Moving forward and being worshipped by the cultivators, this is what a master should do. That's right. Big brother. Xiao Mao was also excited. He clapped his hands and praised. Then, he flew to Xiao Hua's side and said, "You will definitely be a cultivator on the same level as the Imperial Thunder Sect's Palace Master. Your actions are the role model of the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples." What senior sister said is also from the bottom of her heart. We can hide today, but the days ahead are long. We still have to pass through Huan country and the millions of Meng mountains. -11. Chapter 2761. Hihi, alright, that's enough. Xiao Hua's stern face revealed a smile as he looked at Fairy Hongxia, Li Zongbao, and Xiao Mao. He said, "I know what you're talking about. I'm just afraid that the Seven Spirit Mountains formation is too powerful. As for this Xiao, not to mention the Seven Spirit Mountains Brahma Pagoda formation with 81 people, even if it's a formation with 360 people, why would this Xiao be afraid? Since Big Brother isn't afraid, I'm not afraid either." Xiao Maro patted his chest and said, "We've all seen Lu Ruochang's square sword formation. Why would we be afraid of this Brahma Pagoda formation? Alright. Since that's the case, we'll go and break the formation." Xiao Hua waved his hand. "Go, go, go." Li Zongbao also pointed forward. "Let them know how powerful I am." Xiao Hua smiled as he looked at Fairy Hongxia. His heart was overflowing with tenderness. If he was alone, he wouldn't be afraid of a formation of 360 people, let alone 81 people. He would definitely go and give it a try. Even if it was the old man who transformed into a sword, Xiao Hua wouldn't be afraid of him at all. There was no need to be so respectful. However, he understood that his responsibility for this trip to Huan country and millions of Meng mountains was not small. Fairy Hongxia had to go. If she was in any danger, he would definitely keep her in his space even if it meant exposing his secret. As for Li Zongbao and Xiao Maro, these two burdens, he didn't know how to deal with them. He could only find a safe way to proceed. However, he didn't expect Fairy Hongxia to refute his idea. Fairy Hongxia was worried that Xiao Hua would be angry. However, Xiao Hua's heart was filled with joy. How could he be angry? Fairy Hongxia's plan for herself showed that Fairy Hongxia treated herself as Xiao Hua's wife and not a disciple of Luyang's Cai family. Dui Chimeng probably treated Kui Hongshan the same way. Xiao Hua was happy. At the same time, he thought of his junior brother in Myriad Thunder Valley. If that's the case, my plan will be useful. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua was shocked. Kui Hongshan and Dui Chimeng's words suddenly appeared in his mind. Li on the other hand, is making rapid progress. She's already at the 6th level of qi refining, right? Now that he's grown up, he rarely returns to the Myriad Thunder Valley. Sometimes, when he comes back, he'll stay in his cave and meditate. This little brother also rarely sees him. 6th layer of qi refining? A few days ago, I heard from eldest senior brother that Leah has already reached the 7th layer of qi refining. Well, it's been a while. For your husband, how can I tell the difference between the 5th, 6th, and 7th levels of qi refining? Damn it. I didn't pay attention to it that day, but there's a hidden meaning in their words. It was only now that Xiao Hua came to his senses. Leah, when I saw you that day, you seem to have already reached the 6th or 7th layer of the aura refining realm. How many years has it been? There's no reason you're still in the 7th layer of the aura refining realm, right? Presumably, this little fellow had some kind of fortuitous encounter that allowed him to conceal his cultivation. They must have thought that Leah learned some secret technique from me, right? Xiao Hua didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he recalled Xiong Zhili's expression when he asked him what kind of divine ability he wanted that day. Husband. Fairy Hongxia saw the strange expression on Xiao Hua's face and hurriedly transmitted her voice. What I said, don't be angry. Eldest senior brother Li and junior brother Xiao are not outsiders. My wife. Xiao Hua held Fairy Hongxia's hand and transmitted his voice back. Your husband knows that I'm of low birth and don't have the self-restraint of a disciple from a cultivation family. If there's anything wrong in the future, feel free to say it. There's no need to be afraid of anything. Seeing that Xiao Hua wasn't unhappy, Fairy Hongxia's heart relaxed. She lowered her head and said, husband is the most important thing. I will definitely remind husband in the future, but I definitely won't be so obvious. Actually, if it wasn't for eldest senior brother Li and Xiao Mao, I would have already transmitted my voice. A good wife and loving mother, Xiao Hua lamented in his heart. He slightly exerted his strength and held Fairy Hongxia's hand tightly. He sighed and said, "What virtue and ability did I have to be able to gain the favor of my wife? With my wife's company, I won't be lonely in this lifetime. Hehe, I will definitely do what I can. If this isn't Sister Shui, then who is it?" Fairy Hongxia blinked her eyes and laughed. Shui Shui. Hearing Fairy Hongxia mention Shui Shui, Xiao Hua frowned slightly. "Oh, what's the matter, my husband?" Fairy Hongxia was quick-witted. Seeing that Xiao Hua was unhappy, she hurriedly said, "Sister Shui, what's the matter?" "Or, I won't. Junior brother Xiao." Just as Xiao Hua was about to answer, Li Zongbao said calmly, "Just now when Qi Chengyi mentioned the extreme magnetic ray, I thought of something." Xiao Hua looked at Fairy Hongxia and smiled bitterly. He let go of her hand and flew to Li Zongbao's side. He asked, "Eldest senior brother Li, please enlighten me. It's recorded in the ancient books of the Utopia faction." Li Zongbao said unhurriedly, "The extreme magnetic ray is usually produced in places extremely far away. Because of the magnetic force in these places, it can produce primordial rays that are like sharp swords. Although the primordial rays are formless, they are like substance. When used with flying swords or magic weapons, they are extremely sharp. The seniors of my Taoist sect once traveled to the extreme north and collected the extreme magnetic ray to refine magic weapons. The quality of this magic weapon is far superior to that of ordinary magic weapons. Actually, when Qi Chengyi mentioned the extreme magnetic ray, Xiao Hua's heart skipped a beat. The extreme magnetic ray was one of the necessary items in the refining method of the spirit-exterminating vital ray that Zhong Qingxiao had given him. Although Xiao Hua had only glanced at it briefly, he still remembered the name. He was still wondering what the extreme magnetic ray was. He didn't expect it to be found in the extreme north of the Huan country. "How do we collect the extreme magnetic ray?" Xiao Hua asked. "Hehe, junior brother Xiao, don't think too much about it now." Li Zongbao laughed. "Those who can travel to the extreme north are all nascent soul stage and separating soul stage seniors. Moreover, the extreme magnetic ray is very strange. If you don't have a magic weapon that can restrain the extreme magnetic ray, even if you go there, it's impossible to get the extreme magnetic ray. So it's like this." Xiao Hua still didn't give up. "Then, which senior of my Taoist sect has this magic weapon?" "It seems to be the Kunlun sect." Li Zongbao pondered for a moment and said, "The Kunlun sect was established the earliest and has a long history. They seem to have a magic weapon called the two-winged spectroscope, which is refined using the extreme magnetic ray." "Senior brother, which senior is also from the Kunlun sect?" "That's not it." Li Zongbao shook his head and said, "Of course there are many seniors who went to the extreme north. My Utopia faction also has some. However, only the Kunlun sect can successfully collect the extreme magnetic ray and refine it into a magic weapon." Kunlun sect tilde Xiao Hua looked pensive and immediately thought of the frost bamboo. However, Li Zongbao obviously misunderstood Xiao Hua and hurriedly said in a low voice, "Junior brother Xiao, don't look down on the Kunlun sect. Although the Kunlun sect didn't have any powerful disciples in this sword battle, and even martial uncle Yuan Zhongyu had a mediocre performance, he was hiding his strength and biding his time. The foundation of the Kunlun sect is far from what we've seen. According to Master, even arrogant sects like your country of Shi's Shanghua sect and Chiqiao sect may not be able to compete with the Kunlun sect. The Kunlun sect is so powerful." Xiao Hua had never been to Mount Kunlun in the country of Lian, so he naturally didn't know the situation of the Kunlun sect. Seeing Li Zongbao so serious about this matter, he couldn't help but be slightly surprised. "Yes, there are many cultivation sects on the Xiaoyu continent, but there are only a few that can really be in charge. These cultivation sects have also risen and fallen with the passage of time, but if there's one that can really stand tall, it's the Kunlun sect," Li Zongbao said in a low voice. "Big brother." At this moment, Xiao Mao opened his mouth and pointed into the distance. "If we fly forward for another 10 miles, there's an ice field. I've already seen it. There are hundreds of sword cultivators waiting for us there. Chi Chang'e is among them. Then, he pointed to the left and said with a cautious expression, there are also hundreds of swordsmen over there, blocking the way to Mount Meng. Just as Big Brother expected, if we don't break through the Seven Spirit Mountains Brahma Pagoda formation, the disciples of the Seven Spirit Mountain may not let us go. Good. Xiao Hua looked at Li Zongbao and said, we'll fly slowly, and the preparations are almost done. How about it, Senior Brother Li, you still want to lead the way? Good. Li Zongbao laughed and clapped his hand. A 1-foot-long ring appeared and said, let the sword cultivators of the Seven Spirit Mountain see how powerful I am. Oh! Senior Brother Li, where's your immortal piercing whip? Xiao Hua was surprised to see Li Zongbao take out a ring. The immortal piercing whip was destroyed in the spirit-devouring formation of the sword cultivators. Li Zongbao's face showed a trace of pity. I don't have a suitable magic treasure, so I'll use Master's yin-yang ring for the time being. Oh, the spirit-devouring formation. Xiao Hua immediately thought of the few spirit-devouring bugs in the sword pouch and asked, can't it be repaired? Maybe it can, maybe it can't. Li Zongbao said desolately, even if it can be repaired, I'm afraid it won't be the same immortal piercing whip as before. All right, then. Senior Brother Li should follow behind me. As he spoke, Xiao Hua released his divine sense and looked ahead. Xiao Mao? Your divine sense can see more than 10 miles away? Li Zongbao naturally released his divine sense and suddenly realized something. He looked at Xiao Mao with some astonishment. Xiao Mao's face showed a trace of unnaturalness, and he said with a smile, yes, my divine sense is stronger than ordinary cultivators. Now I can see more than 10 miles away. That's right. Xiao Hua didn't notice this before. His divine sense was stronger than ordinary cultivators, and he also had Buddhist awareness. When Xiao Mao said it just now, he didn't care at all. Now that he heard Li Zongbao's astonishment, he understood. Ordinary cultivators in the late foundation establishment stage could only see more than 10 miles away with their divine sense. Xiao Mao, who was just in the middle foundation establishment stage, could see more than 10 miles away. The strength of his divine sense was not ordinary. -11. Chapter 2762. However, the strength of one's divine sense was not only related to one's cultivation method, it was also closely related to some secret techniques. In particular, the range of one's divine sense should be one of the secrets of a cultivator. Xiao Mao was not on guard against Xiao Hua and the others, so he inadvertently revealed it. If it were anyone else, he would definitely have concealed it. Of course, Li Zongbao also understood. He only asked a question and then shut his mouth. He didn't say anything else and looked into the distance. Fairy Hong Xia blinked her eyes and looked like she wanted to say something. Xiao Mao was more observant than Xiao Hua. He quickly smiled and said, Senior sister, please don't ask me. I've been like this since I was young. I don't have any secret techniques. Oh, Fairy Hong Xia was a little disappointed. She smiled and said, there are very few secret techniques that can strengthen one's spiritual sense. Although my cultivation is not bad, my spiritual sense cultivation is still lacking. I haven't found a suitable mental cultivation method yet. Is that so? Why didn't you say so earlier? Xiao Hua was looking ahead. When he heard Fairy Hong Xia's muttering, he asked curiously, I thought you were a disciple of the Huanhua sect and had a golden core stage master. I thought you would have a lot of secret techniques. Hee. Fairy Hong Xia laughed. My dear Xiao, you can ask Senior Brother Li. How can an ordinary cultivator obtain the spiritual sense forging technique? Even for a genius like Senior Brother Li, I'm afraid he only has a few simple chant. Li Zongbao did not reply. Obviously, he had the spiritual sense forging technique. However, it belonged to the Utopia faction. He could not tell Fairy Hong Xia. Xiao Hua heard and felt a little heartache. He knew why Fairy Hong Xia did not tell him. There were many cultivation methods and secret techniques in his space, and he was slowly comprehending them. He also had the so-called spiritual force forging technique, but most of them were damaged and incomplete, so they weren't very useful. After thinking for a while, Xiao Hua took out a jade slip and handed it to Fairy Hongxia. He said, "This is God's guidance. It is a spiritual sense forging technique. Take it and comprehend it." "No, my dear Xiao." A sweet smile appeared on Fairy Hongxia's face as she said, "This is the secret technique of your Imperial Thunder sect. It's not suitable for me to comprehend it yet." Of course, what Fairy Hongxia said was at this time. If it was at that time after the dual cultivation ceremony, she would definitely ask Xiao Hua for it. It doesn't matter. This isn't a secret technique of the Imperial Thunder sect. Xiao Hua waves his hand and the jade letter flies in front of Fairy Hongxia and says, "In the future, if you want any cultivation technique or even other things, you can tell this Xiao." "Hehe, thank you so much, my dear Xiao." Fairy Hongxia was overjoyed and accepted the jade slip with a smile. "Big brother you can't favor one and discriminate against the other. I don't have such a secret technique." Xiao Mao's eyes lit up when he heard that it wasn't a secret technique from the Imperial Thunder sect. "I'll give it to you, I'll give it to you." Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, "I'll let your senior sister copy it for you." "Thank you, big brother." Xiao Mao called out with a smile and flew in front of Fairy Hongxia. "Thank you for your trouble, senior sister." Fairy Hongxia also didn't delay. While flying, she made a copy of the complete God's guidance and gave it to Xiao Mao. Xiao Mao took the jade letter and just by using his divine sense to scan it, he was dumbfounded. How was this a secret technique? It was simply a cultivation technique. Just the first level of the chant was enough to make him puzzled. Unconsciously, Xiao Mao felt a trace of warmth in his heart. The loneliness that he couldn't dispel all this time seemed to be gradually disappearing. The four of them flew at a leisurely pace for nearly the time it took to eat a meal. In the sky in front of them, in the white dawn, there were about 100 swordsmen wearing the same sword attire standing in an orderly manner. These swordsmen were all strong and healthy people. Their stature was almost uniform. Qi Chengyi was standing in front of these disciples. Seeing that Xiao Hua and the others were actually smiling and flying over without the slightest bit of panic, he was very surprised. At the same time, the slight delay he had when he received the message from the swordsman had already disappeared. "You really keep your word." Qi Chengyi flew a few feet forward and said with a smile. Xiao Hua was no longer hiding behind Li Zongbao like he was during the Dao sword battle. He also flew forward and said with a smile, "There are disciples of the Seven Spirit Mountain all around. I can't go anywhere else even if I want to. I can only keep coming here. People of the Sword Domain have always been hospitable. I was afraid that you would misunderstand my hospitality, so I wanted to invite you over." Qi Chengyi's expression didn't change as he replied naturally. Xiao Hua didn't waste time with him. He pointed his finger and said, "Is this the Brahma Pagoda formation of your Seven Spirit Mountain? You are really impatient." Qi Chengyi shook his head and said, "The Brahma Pagoda formation of my Seven Spirit Mountain is a famous formation in the Sword Domain. How can it be so simple?" "Oh, what? What do you mean?" Xiao Hua was a little confused. "If you don't set up the formation, how can we break it? You should hurry up." "We still have to hurry." "Ha ha ha you are really interesting." Qi Chengyi laughed. "You can still be so calm in the face of my Seven Spirit Mountain's Brahma Pagoda formation. This is the first time I have seen you." "Yes, I haven't seen it before, but there will be many in the future." Xiao Hua nodded and said seriously, "When I establish a sect in the future, I will set a rule. No one can panic when they see the Brahma Pagoda formation of the Seven Spirit Mountain." "Ah! Ha 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 Qi Chengyi was really laughing very happily. He cupped his hands and said, "Xiao Hua, you are indeed a wonderful person. You are worthy of my sword realm transforming into a sword and sending a message to my Seven Spirit Mountain." After a while, Qi Chengyi stopped laughing and said, "If you were a disciple of my sword domain, I would definitely think of ways to befriend you. Unfortunately, you are a disciple of the Dao sect. What a pity." "Pity? What's there to pity?" Xiao Hua asked curiously. "Everyone in the world, regardless of whether they are cultivators or swordsmen, are all humans. They are all cultivators. Why can't I befriend them?" Even if. Sigh, forget it. Actually, among the sword cultivators of your Huan country, there are also people who are magnanimous. I also respect them. Xiao Hua naturally couldn't say Ji Yi's name. Instead, he looked at the distant horizon and said, "Oh." A strange look appeared in Qi Chengyi's eyes. He said curiously, "This is also the first time I have heard of this. Previously, all the cultivators I have met didn't see us as cultivators. They only felt that they were of the orthodox Taoism. If everyone was like what you are thinking, I'm afraid that such a meaningless great battle between Taoism and sword would never occur." Xiao Hua interrupted Qi Chengyi's words. "Unfortunately, this is only a beautiful wish. Those who walk different paths cannot work together. This is also an ancient saying." That's right. At this point, Qi Chengyi felt a sense of hypocrisy. He waved his hand and said, "Guests of the Tao sect, please, after everyone enters the formation, the Brahma Pagoda's formation will be activated. Wait." Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, "Before entering the formation, I still have a condition." "What condition?" Qi Chengyi frowned. "Why didn't you mention it earlier? It's not too late to mention it now, right?" Xiao Hua said indifferently. Qi Chengyi thought for a moment and asked, "What condition do you have? Tell me about it first. We came here to gain experience. It has nothing to do with the great battle now." Xiao Hua said word by word, "Since your sect received Senior Huaijian's message and had no choice but to set up the sword formation, we can naturally accept it. However, life and death are involved within the formation. If we were to use too much force, don't blame us for harming the lives of your sect's disciples. Naturally, if my 7 Spirit Mountains disciples were to use too much force, you must forgive them," Qi Chengyi said indifferently. Then, he quietly listened to Xiao Hua's explanation. "We don't want to take too many lives. Therefore, we will try our best to hold back within the formation." Xiao Hua looked at the 100 or so 7 Spirit Mountains disciples in the distance and said, "However, I will only hold back in this battle. If we encounter any sword cultivators in the future, I will not show any mercy. I hope you can promise me that once we break the Brahma Pagoda's formation, you will not send any more sword cultivators to harass us." This. Qi Chengyi frowned. He didn't know why Xiao Hua was so confident in breaking the formation. However, when he looked at Xiao Hua, Li Zongbao, and the others, he came to a realization and said with a smile, "I will inform Senior Huaijian of your benevolence. However, I cannot promise you this. I can only promise you that if you break the formation of my 7 Spirit Mountain, my 7 Spirit Mountains disciples will not stop you. If any 7 Spirit Mountains disciples try to stop you, you can kill them. My 7 Spirit Mountain will not hold it against you. As for the other sword sects, I don't dare to represent them." Xiao Hua saw that Qi Chengyi had misunderstood and knew that he thought he was stalling and wanted to finish the job in one fell swoop. However, he didn't explain and said, "That's all I have to say. Don't blame me for being ruthless in the future." "All right, I will definitely pass on your words. Please, Senior Huaijian." Qi Chengyi nodded and stepped aside. The 100 or so swordsmen behind him moved at the same time, revealing a passage. However, the 100 or so swordsmen's faces were no longer as calm as before. They had all heard Xiao Hua and Qi Chengyi's words. Xiao Hua's current cultivation was only around the middle stage of foundation establishment, which was equivalent to a 3rd or 4th stage swordsman. He wasn't too far off from these swordsmen's cultivation. However, according to Xiao Hua's words, he didn't put them in his eyes at all. Therefore, each and every one of them glared angrily at him. Their gazes were like flying swords that pierced Xiao Hua full of holes. Xiao Hua really didn't put these swordsmen in his eyes. He swaggered and flew in. Li Zongbao and the others were different from Xiao Hua. Their faces were filled with vigilance as they released their divine senses. Only then did they follow Xiao Hua through the gap between the swordsmen. At this moment, the 100 or so swordsmen were still in neat rows, forming a square formation. Xiao Hua and the others had entered a corner of the square. In fact, the entire square was already covered by Xiao Hua's Buddhist sense. There were no strange fluctuations at all. It was no different from ordinary swordsmen standing in the air. -11. Chapter 2763. Of course, these 7 spirit mountain swordsmen were weapon cultivators. Their bodies flickered with a faint brilliance. The brilliance circled around them and swam up and down. When Xiao Hua and the others entered, the rhythm of the flickering light and swam was somewhat chaotic. But as Xiao Hua went deeper, the brightness and darkness of the brilliance began to converge. Even the rhythm of the brilliance began to synchronize. Oh, so that's how it is. Although Xiao Hua was smiling, his heart was as clear as a mirror. Not to mention that the 7 Spirit Mountain had received the order to transform into swords, they would not act rashly. Even if they did not transform into swords, if the 7 Spirit Mountain wanted to meet him, they would definitely not use some sloppy array. Since they dared to set up a sword array, then, they must have the confidence to kill him in one strike. The combined attack of 100 weapon cultivators. I'm afraid it's powerful. This young master was exaggerating just now. Xiao Hua's mind whirled. I shouldn't have let Li Zongbao, Xiao Mao, and my wife enter the array. This first strike is not easy to receive. After the first strike, this young master will deal a heavy blow. While Xiao Hua was thinking, he had already arrived at the center of the array. This was a space about 100 feet in size. It was also square. Are you ready, sir? Qi Chengyi's voice came from outside the weapon cultivators. It sounded like a reminder from fellow disciples who were competing. This Qi is going to activate the array. Xiao Hua looked around and transmitted a few words to Fairy Hongxia. He raised his voice and said, "This Xiao and the others are ready. Sir, bring it on." Xiao Hua's voice was also gentle. It was impossible to tell that this was a fight between cultivators and swordsmen. His tone was even more indifferent than when he first entered the Thunder Arena. All right. Be careful, sire, the formation. Before Qi Chengyi could finish speaking, his voice trailed off. The weapon cultivators around Xiao Hua and the others simultaneously flashed with a beautiful brilliance. This brilliance was like a rising sun, illuminating the nearby night sky. Moreover, this sun was actually rising slowly, rapidly covering an area of several hundred feet around Xiao Hua and the others. Even Qi Chengyi's words couldn't be heard. Damn, this great array is powerful. Xiao Hua felt that his divine sense and Buddhist consciousness were also being blocked, and he couldn't help but feel a little surprised. His entire body flashed with faint lightning, and his entire body rapidly rushed up, rushing towards the gap above his head that hadn't closed yet. Unfortunately, it was at this moment that Qi Chengyi's voice rang out from above again. Sir, the Great Formation hasn't been activated yet. According to our previous agreement, you can't attack yet. Chimpage. Why would this young master care so much about you? Xiao Hua sneered and stretched out his hand. A rumbling sound of thunder came from between his hands. This was a spell that he had been thinking about ever since he couldn't summon lightning in the Blood Drop Paradise. Now that he suddenly used it, he was still a little rusty. Your Excellency, please calm down. Qi Chengyi's voice was still filled with concern. If you don't abide by our previous agreement, not only will you not be able to obtain the Spirit Tool's secret refining technique, the 7 Spirit Mountain will also report this matter to Senior Hua Jian. If Senior Hua Jian were to personally take action. Hehe, would you find it interesting? Well. Xiao Hua hesitated after hearing Qi Chengyi's threat. However, while he was hesitating, the gap above his head sped up. You dare to trick this young master. Xiao Hua suddenly came to a realization. His hands moved, and with a crackling sound, a few bolts of lightning appeared between his hands, striking towards that crack. His body shot out like a sharp arrow once again. Ha 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 tilde this Qi is thinking for your excellency. Qi Chengyi laughed loudly, and his voice disappeared again. Rumble. The lightning struck the gap that hadn't closed yet, and a huge sound rang out. However, wherever the lightning struck, the brilliance on the weapon cultivator's body became even more intense. Furthermore, this brilliance continued to spread outwards and only stopped after it had spread for several dozen feet. Just as the brilliance returned to its original state, Xiao Hua could clearly see that within the brilliance, in the gaps between the weapon cultivators, the lightning was gradually dissipating with a sizzling sound. Damn it, The 7-spirit mountain came prepared. Xiao Hua understood. They must know that this young master's phoenix celestial body can attract lightning, so they set up the Great Brahma Pagoda formation. This great formation has the ability to avoid lightning, and all the lightning can only concentrate on the gaps between the disciples who set up the formation, and can't directly hit the disciples who set up the formation. While Xiao Hua was pondering, the radiance above his head had already merged. Streams of flowing radiance flowed back and forth within the space of several hundred meters like water ripples, covering the figures of the 81 weapon cultivators who set up the formation. Even Xiao Hua's divine sense was blocked within this space, and could no longer penetrate it. It seemed like this was another blood drop paradise. Just as Xiao Hua was about to rush towards the weapon cultivator closest to him, a huge rumbling sound rang out from the radiance all around him. Not good. I'm afraid this is the first attack, Xiao Hua thought to himself. He didn't have time to attack the weapon cultivator closest to him, and his figure rapidly descended. However, he still shouted, "Quickly set up the innate primordial water, yes." In the center of the great formation, Fairy Hong Xia had already received Xiao Hua's instructions. When she heard the order, she immediately shook her shoulders, and the ice phoenix celestial body that was several hundred meters in size was released. She opened her mouth, and a stream of sparkling innate primordial water sprayed out. Under Fairy Hong Xia's control, it protected Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao. When Xiao Hua landed, he landed right in the gap of the primordial water. Boom! A huge restrictive force struck from the place where Xiao Hua landed, and it hit the primordial water that covered Xiao Hua's figure. The innate primordial water created waves of several feet high, and Fairy Hong Xia's ice phoenix celestial body swayed twice. It seemed to be quite strenuous. Moreover, after the radiance dissipated, the restrictive force didn't disappear. Instead, it surrounded the sparkling water and slowly expanded outside of it. Xiao Lang, Fairy Hong Xia laughed bitterly. Although I can use the ice phoenix celestial body to cast the innate primordial water, part of the attack on the primordial water will also be transmitted to the celestial body. If it was a dozen people, it would be fine. But with nearly 100 people attacking, I'm afraid I won't be able to last long. All right. Xiao Hua nodded slightly and said, "You just need to protect senior brother Li and Xiao Mao. I'll speed up the process of breaking the array." As he spoke, Xiao Hua clapped his hand and the Kunlun mirror appeared in his hand. He turned his head and ordered, "Let me out." Fairy Hong Xia hurriedly activated her phoenix celestial body. The innate primordial water that was originally easy to break open was now somewhat strenuous under the restrictive force. Open. The moment Xiao Hua came out, the innate primordial water immediately met with the restrictive force. He sneered in his heart and activated the Kunlun mirror in his hand. As he chanted an incantation, a blue radiance shot out from the Kunlun mirror and struck the nearest radiance. When the blue light beam struck the radiance immediately froze and turned into a blue ice shard. Within the ice dregs, there was a blue crystal. The figure of an extremely astonished weapon refiner disciple was actually embedded within this crystal. However, the crystal didn't fall. Instead, it hung within the radiance that seemed to be a hole. Wung! Wung! Near the crystal, the radiance flickered at the same time. Circles of obscure ripples surged towards the area that was struck. As the radiance flickered, the blue ice shard actually began to melt. The weapon cultivator's figure also began to move. Powerful. Xiao Hua secretly praised in his heart and sneered at the same time. If this array was used to deal with ordinary golden core cultivators, it would naturally work. Unfortunately, the one you've met is this young master. How can these 100 or so foundation establishment swordsmen be a match for this young master? Even if you set up an array, it's still not enough. Go. Xiao Hua pointed with his finger, and the Kunlun mirror flew out from his hand, casually shining in a direction. With a whoosh, another blue-colored light beam shot out, and with lightning speed, it struck another weapon refiner disciple. That azure ice crystal appeared once again. At this time, Xiao Hua didn't wait for the brilliance to flicker. He urged the Kunlun mirror again. This time, the place that was hit was near the previous location, Wung tilde within the entire formation, a rumbling sound suddenly resounded. It was as if 100 magical treasures had been activated at the same time. An enormous force that could even sink a mountain into the ground was born from the top of Xiao Hua's head, pressing down on Xiao Hua. Ha ha ha. Who's afraid of you? Xiao Hua laughed. He divided his divine sense to urge the Kunlun mirror and continued to attack. At the same time, he clapped his hand and held the wishful steel staff in his hand. Like a sturgeon swimming against the current, he rushed towards the huge force. The wishful steel staff in his hand also struck out. Boom tilde tilde, what a huge shock. The entire space was shaking. That huge force was actually caught by Xiao Hua's wishful steel staff. Xiao Hua's figure didn't even move at all. Like a pine tree, he stood majestically. Do you want to come again? Xiao Hua shouted. Following the direction of the force, he rushed up. The wishful steel staff was raised high, and he casually hit a place in the array. Boom tilde, the brilliance was annihilated with the fall of Xiao Hua's wishful steel staff. There seemed to be no stagnation. At the place where the wishful steel staff fell, a weapon refiner disciple who had gradually transformed into a magic weapon was also hit out of the array by Xiao Hua. The weapon refiner disciple's body slowly recovered. He looked at his figure that was flying further and further away in disbelief. He tried his best to control his balance. Xiao Hua tilde, just as Xiao Hua turned to look at the weapon refiner next to him who was hit and was about to raise the wishful steel staff again, he heard the voice of Hongxia Fairy. Xiao Hua's divine sense swept back and saw that Hongxia Fairy's Ice Phoenix Dharma body could no longer bear the heavy pressure and attack of the Brahma Pagoda's array. It had already been absorbed into her body, and the innate primordial water's defense was also restrained by the imprisonment. It was getting thinner and thinner, and it could no longer be maintained. As for Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao, they had already rushed out of the primordial water and took out their respective magic weapons. The magic weapons flashed with brilliance and emitted a strange sound as they attacked the weapon refiner disciple closest to them. However, the weapon refiners were now all in the divine transformation stage. Each of them was like a magic weapon. Although the power of a single magic weapon might not be comparable to Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao, under the Brahma Pagoda's array, the yin and yang rings and the heaven and earth rings were restrained by the magic weapons. They were always hit and were unable to hurt the weapon refiners of the 7 spirit mountains. -11. Chapter 2764. Go tilde Xiao Hua did not dare to be negligent. He patted his forehead, and an even more vast primordial true water rushed out from the top of his head, protecting Hongxia Fairy, Li Zongbao, and Xiao Mao. You don't have a magic weapon, so wait here for a while. Xiao Hua shouted and waved his staff again. Just as he was about to attack, his gaze fell and he was slightly stunned. Previously, he had already sent a nearby artifact cultivator disciple flying, revealing a gap. But now, that gap had already disappeared, and another artifact cultivator who looked exactly the same appeared in that gap. Strange. What's going on? Xiao Hua felt strange. When he waved his hand, the staff broke the force of imprisonment, and the brilliance around him disappeared, and he sent another disciple flying from the array. However, just as the big array revealed a flaw, the brilliance of the whole array once again flowed like water waves. When a layer of watery brilliance swayed, a disciple naturally appeared in the gap, and then another attack was sent out from the gap of this disciple. Oh, I understand. Xiao Hua suddenly realized, this big array is like a whole body of water. If I send one flying, it can replace another disciple from the side, and transfer the floor to another place. But, what if this young master sends disciples flying again and again? After Xiao Hua understood, he was very happy again. Although these 81 disciples were powerful, and Li Zongbao, Xiao Mao, and Hongxia Fairy were definitely not their opponents, their attacks could not be seen in Xiao Hua's eyes. Although he could not use the seal of turning the sea, he could not use the flying sword, but with the staff and the Kunlun mirror, Xiao Hua was confident that he could break this array. Come, come, come. I'll let you see the power of this young master. Xiao Hua knew that there was something fishy about it. He waved the staff and displayed the heavenly staff technique, smashing it towards the brilliance of the array. Boom 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 boom. With the fall of the staff, one disciple after another was sent flying by Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua did not need to change places at all. He only needed to hit one place, and the staff would not miss. This is bad. This brat is quite astute. How did you see through the flaws in the formation so quickly? Qi Chengyi stood outside the great formation. When he saw many disciples flying out in just a short while, he was shocked again. Also, this guy's staff technique is like a body cultivator's. He's even stronger than us artifact cultivators. If he continues to fight, the formation will definitely break. However, Qi Chengyi had still underestimated Xiao Hua. Just as he was pondering, a huge rumbling sound rang out from the other side of the great formation. A gentle and slightly mocking voice rang out from there. We have already escaped from the Brahma Pagoda's great formation. Your great formation has been broken by us. This voice belonged to Fairy Hongxia. However, before she could finish her sentence, a strange gu sound came from the array. The light of the array was suddenly extinguished. Ayo, not good. Fairy Hongxia screamed again. At this moment, the great formation of the Brahma Pagoda was shaking rapidly. The weapons that were transformed by the artifact cultivators were like stones falling from the peak of a mountain. They quickly collided with each other, producing a ka sound. Following the continuous vibrations, the shape of the great formation rapidly changed. A sharp protrusion slowly rose from the center of the great formation, and the surroundings of the great formation shrank again. Fairy Hongxia and Li Zongbao's figures were revealed from the side of the great formation. They were somewhat stunned as they looked in front of them. A huge pagoda of about 10 feet in height was formed from the great formation. The huge pagoda was rather rough, and the weapons that were transformed by the artifact cultivators were bricks in the huge pagoda. There were still some gaps between these bricks. Swoosh like ripples on water, a ray of light flashed out from the top of the pagoda. It quickly brushed down. Wherever the ray of light passed, the gaps between the bricks would immediately become tight. In the blink of an eye, a huge, lofty pagoda was revealed in mid-air. When the ray of light reached the bottom of the pagoda, it flashed past each other and immediately rushed up to the top of the pagoda. A loud buzzing sound rang out within the huge pagoda. This is the real Brahma Pagoda Great Formation. Fairy Hongxia looked at Li Zongbao. Li Zongbao's eyes were also flashing with shock. He could understand the formation of 81 artifact cultivators. However, it seemed like this was the first time he had heard of the 81 artifact cultivators forming a huge weapon. It was even more so the first time he had seen it. Your Excellency and the rest of you, please wait here for a moment. You have all come out, but Xiao Hua has yet to come out. This great formation. He has yet to break it. Qi Chengyi glanced at Fairy Hongxia and Li Zongbao, as if he did not put them in his eyes. After saying a few words, he rushed up to the top of the Brahma Pagoda. Although we have all come out, we can still attack from outside the formation. How could Fairy Hongxia be at ease with Xiao Hua? She shook her shoulders and was about to release her Ice Phoenix celestial body. Since you have all come out, it means that you have already broken the formation. If you continue to attack, you will be violating the agreement between you and me, Qi Chengyi said coldly. There are 81 disciples here who are also abiding by the agreement. If you are the first to violate it, don't blame me for going back on my words. At that time, who do you think will be the one at a disadvantage? This. Fairy Hongxia hesitated slightly. Li Zongbao gave her a look and transmitted his voice. Junior sister, don't be impatient. You know junior brother Xiao's cultivation better than me. He could have come out just now, but he stayed in the formation in order to hold Xiao Maro back. This Brahma Pagoda Great Formation is indeed powerful, but I feel that it is impossible to keep junior brother Xiao here. You and I will just watch from the sidelines. Okay. Fairy Hongxia was actually worried. When Li Zongbao said this, she immediately realized what kind of person Xiao Hua was. He was a fierce person who had scared Lu Ruochang away. How could he be trapped in this Brahma Pagoda Great Formation? If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't want to kill and didn't want to reveal his true cultivation, what was there for her to worry about? Before the Brahma Pagoda Great Formation was really activated, Xiao Hua was holding the wishful staff and kicking the weapon cultivator disciples outside the Great Formation. Then, he heard a rumbling sound coming from the space behind him. Xiao Hua scanned it with his divine sense and couldn't help but laugh. It turned out that Xiao Hua had been using the Kunlun mirror to emit a frosty air. During this period of time, it had already condensed more than a dozen places in the Great Formation into crystals. The Great Formation emitted a fierce brilliance to repair these crystals. However, at the same time, Xiao Hua had kicked more than a dozen weapon cultivator disciples out of the Great Formation. All of a sudden, there were less than 30 disciples in the Great Formation. Although the entire Great Formation was overflowing with brilliance to repair these gaps, the positions of the 81 weapon cultivator disciples were fixed. Right behind Xiao Hua, a rather large gap had already appeared. With a single glance, one could see that there were roughly 20 or so empty spots for weapon refinement disciples. This Brahma Pagoda Great Formation actually sent the disciples behind Xiao Hua to Xiao Hua. However, because the weapon cultivators in the Great Formation were different, they had no choice but to reveal a slight flaw in the distance from Xiao Hua. Of course, this flaw was only revealed slightly. With a rumbling sound, the brilliance quickly repaired it. Ha ha ha. This Great Formation has been broken by us. Senior Brother Li, let's go. We'll rush out of the Great Formation. Xiao Hua laughed loudly. His figure swayed and flew towards the gap. Xiao Hua's flying speed was so fast. Although Li Zongbao, Fairy Hongxia and the others were in the center of the Great Formation and were very close to the gap, when Li Zongbao and the other two were not even halfway to the gap, Xiao Hua had already swept over their head. Swoosh! Splendor flashed rapidly in the gap. Pa, 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 sounds rang out. Like building a wall, the great array once again drew weapons from all over and piled them up in the gap. It seemed to be making up for this gap. Fight! How could Xiao Hua allow the Great Formation to be repaired again? With a point of his finger, the Kunlun mirror that had already completed its task flashed with an earthy yellow brilliance once again. A powerful surge of magic power condensed in the earth pillar surged towards the gap, immediately diluting the brilliance in the cave. The pa sounds immediately became much softer. Rumble. After the brilliance of the Great Formation was diluted, it shook violently once again. A powerful suction force was generated from all around the Great Formation. Not only were the weapon cultivators who were sent flying by Xiao Hua pulled back by the huge force, Fairy Hongxia, Li Zongbao, Xiao Hua and Xiao Mao who had already rushed to the gap were also pulled back. Get out! Xiao Hua was ranked third. With a wave of his Daoist robe, heaven and earth in the sleeves was unleashed. In an instant, it enveloped Fairy Hongxia and Li Zongbao. With a casual push, it cut off the suction force of the Great Formation. Their bodies became light, and like arrows, they shot out of the rapidly shrinking gap. After sending off the two of them, Xiao Hua stretched out his hand and used another heaven and earth in the sleeves to grab Xiao Mao. There was no other way. Xiao Mao's cultivation was the weakest among the four of them. Previously, he was the closest to Xiao Hua, but was also far away from the gap. Even when he used all his magic power to fly in this direction, there was still a huge gap. But just as Xiao Hua grabbed Xiao Mao, the rumbling sound beside him became even louder. The brilliance of the Kunlun mirror was covered by the brilliance of the Great Formation, and the gap was quickly repaired. Damn it, you can't bully people like this, alright? Xiao Hua couldn't help but smile bitterly. It seemed that every time they met with danger together, it would always end up like this. Attack. Xiao Hua did not hesitate. He once again activated the Kunlun mirror and was about to launch an attack. At this moment, the entire space emitted a strange sound, as if it was about to destroy the heavens and the earth. The entire space quickly turned upside down and vibrated rapidly. An indescribable, seemingly irresistible wave of energy was produced in the entire space, enveloping Xiao Hua and Xiao Mao within. Even the brilliance of the Kunlun mirror was restrained by the rapidly reverberating waves in the space, unable to attack. Instead, it slowly descended and flew above Xiao Hua's head. -11. Chapter 2765. Big Brother. Seeing this, Xiao Maro seemed a little ashamed. He looked at Xiao Hua and wanted to say something, but found it hard to open his mouth. Hehe, don't say anything. Xiao Hua laughed. I didn't plan to go out at all. I wanted to send you out first so I could harm these weapon cultivators. Now, you're in for a treat. Take a good look. Yes. Xiao Maro knew that Xiao Hua was comforting him. If he wanted to break the array himself, he wouldn't have let the three of them in. Just like what Fairy Hong Xia and Li Zongbao saw from the outside, the entire array changed abruptly. Xiao Hua and Xiao Maro were dumbfounded as the array shook violently. However, they were even more shocked than Li Zongbao and Fairy Hong Xia. This was because, in their eyes, the array became bigger and bigger. The space in the pagoda grew from 100 feet to a few hundred feet. Of course, if it wasn't the array that became bigger, then it was Xiao Hua and Xiao Maro who became smaller. As for who was bigger and who was smaller, Xiao Hua and Xiao Maro who were in the array naturally couldn't tell. This is the real Brahma pagoda array. Just like Fairy Hong Xia, when Xiao Hua saw the pagoda-shaped space within the Brahma pagoda, he muttered to himself in his heart. It was the 81 magic artifacts that formed the entire Brahma pagoda. Yee-wa-wa tilde an inexplicable sound came from the top of the pagoda. It slowly descended and reverberated in the entire pagoda space. Psi tilde Xiao Maro frowned first, as if a trace of impatience had appeared in his heart. Oh, what's wrong? Xiao Hua didn't feel that there was anything strange about the sound and looked at Xiao Maro strangely. This sound is very irritating in my ears. Xiao Maro looked at Xiao Hua and answered honestly. And there's a kind of impulse to let go of everything. Let go of everything. Xiao Hua was slightly stunned. It feels like everything you do is meaningless. Let go of everything and surrender. Xiao Maro explained. This is the sound attack of weapon cultivators. Damn it, it's really powerful. I see. Xiao Hua nodded slightly. However, this sound didn't have the effect that Xiao Maro had described. I'm afraid it's because of the difference in cultivation level. Xiao Hua didn't think too much about it. He pointed his finger, and the Kunlun mirror once again flashed with brilliance. The entire mirror faced upwards, and with a shua sound, a green brilliance several feet in size shot out from the Kunlun mirror, shooting straight towards the surface of the pagoda that was flashing with a faint white light. The green brilliance shot straight up, and just as it flew up 1 foot, the misty green threads of light began to transform, and thick green trees began to appear in the brilliance. With a rumbling sound, the green trees collided with each other like mountains and seas of trees. They swayed and collided with the Brahma pagoda. Following the loud roar, the entire pagoda shook violently. The faint Sanskrit chants actually began to appear intermittently amidst the roar. All right. When Xiao Hua saw that the Kunlun mirror was effective, he was overjoyed. He activated the magic power in his body, and rays of green brilliance unceasingly surged out. These rays of brilliance struck the same direction of the Brahma pagoda, causing the entire pagoda to shake incessantly. It seemed like it was about to collapse. Buzz tilde a milky white brilliance, along with a kind of intense fluctuation, appeared at the top of the pagoda. It covered the bottom of the pagoda, and scattered the brilliance of Xiao Hua's Kunlun mirror, and wherever the brilliance went, the shaking of the Brahma pagoda gradually stopped. With just these. Xiao Hua sneered and instructed Xiao Mao, you will fall to the bottom of the great array, and see how I will break it. Yes. Xiao Mao knew that he couldn't help, so he released the universe ring to protect himself and flew down. However, as he flew, he slightly turned his head back, as if he was worried about Xiao Hua. Rise. When Xiao Hua saw that Xiao Mao had flown far away, he shouted loudly. He held the Kunlun mirror with both hands, and the tricolored brilliance of the Kunlun mirror soared into the sky, like a waterfall, and struck the top of the Brahma pagoda. Repulse tilde just before the tricolored brilliance rushed into the Brahma pagoda, a muffled sound came from the top of the pagoda. At the same time, countless rays of white brilliance emerged from all over the Brahma pagoda like fireflies, and gathered at the top of the pagoda. In the blink of an eye, a gigantic humanoid figure was formed in front of the tricolored brilliance. This humanoid figure was 3 jong tall, and its facial features were somewhat blurry. The upper body was slightly clearer, and it had 2 arms and a body. However, the lower body was still formed by the white brilliance, and it didn't transform. When this humanoid figure appeared, it immediately clenched its huge fist and smashed towards the tricolored brilliance of the Kunlun mirror. Boom! With a loud sound, the tricolored brilliance was actually destroyed by the fist. Although the scattered brilliance hit the Brahma Pagoda again, it was obvious that the attack on the Brahma Pagoda had weakened by a lot, and it didn't pose a threat. Artifact Spirit. Seeing the birth of the gigantic spirit, Xiao Hua was shocked at first, but then he came to a realization. Those specks of brilliance that were like fireflies from before were the artifact spirits of every artifact cultivator's artifact. These artifact spirits were extremely weak, and these 81 artifact spirits were gathered together with the help of the Brahma Pagoda's great formation, giving birth to an even larger artifact spirit. This artifact spirit was equivalent to the combined power of 81 swordsmen. Not to mention ordinary foundation establishment cultivators, even golden core cultivators would be defeated if they entered this formation. Therefore, it was extremely normal for this gigantic spirit to be able to disperse the attack of Xiao Hua's Kunlun mirror. Good. Understanding this, Xiao Hua beamed with joy. Since these artifact cultivators of the 7 Spirit Mountain could give birth to weak artifact spirits, then Qi Chengyi's promise must be based on something. The 7 Spirit Mountain definitely had a secret technique to create artifact spirits, and since Xiao Hua had broken this formation, would he still have to worry about not being able to obtain the secret technique? You all are really underestimating this young master. Xiao Hua activated the Kunlun mirror and said with a smile, "This young master's strength is comparable to a nascent soul cultivator. How can your 81 swordsmen compare to this young master? Not to mention now, even before the great battle of the Sword Catacomb, these 81 swordsmen were no match for this young master. Did this young master eat those 360 foundation establishment pills for nothing?" As he thought about this, the thick brilliance of the Kunlun mirror shot out again and shot towards the gigantic spirit. The gigantic spirit grabbed with its hand, and its palm, which was several feet in size, directly slapped down, covering the 3 rays of brilliance. Immediately, a huge force was born from the Kunlun mirror, pressing down the Kunlun mirror by several feet. Oh! Xiao Hua's figure naturally followed the Kunlun mirror down by several feet, and he couldn't help but be slightly surprised. Although this Kunlun mirror was marvelous, it wasn't a spirit artifact after all. In front of an artifact spirit, all attacks were restricted. Fine. This young master is still in his old profession. Xiao Hua thought for a moment, and with a wave of his hand, the Kunlun mirror flew into the air, and the 3 rays of brilliance aimlessly attacked the entire Brahma Pagoda. Xiao Hua slapped his hand, and the wishful staff appeared in his hand again. He casually waved the staff and rushed into the air. The gigantic spirit seemed to have some spiritual intelligence. It roared and grabbed with its hand, and the huge force of imprisonment mixed with a strong force grabbed towards Xiao Hua. If nothing unexpected happened, even a demonic artifact couldn't block this grab of the gigantic spirit. The power of imprisonment and attack would definitely fall on Xiao Hua's body, but how could the physical body of a Dao sect cultivator resist the artifact spirits condensed by 81 artifacts? Unfortunately, this Brahma Pagoda array met Xiao Hua. Boom! The wishful staff, which didn't belong to the 5 elements, was able to hit the palm of the artifact spirit. In addition to the power of imprisonment and attack being scattered by Xiao Hua's wishful staff, the palm of the artifact spirit was also shattered by the wishful staff. The shattered pieces of the artifact spirit rotated in the air for a moment, hesitated for a moment, and wanted to merge back into the gigantic spirit. However, the fragments swam around the gigantic spirit's palm for a moment, and then flew towards the top of the pagoda. Haha, so that's how it is. Xiao Hua laughed and waved the wishful staff in his hand again. He rushed to the side of the gigantic spirit, and with a crackling sound, he fought with the gigantic spirit. The gigantic spirit was just an artifact spirit. Although it had some spiritual intelligence, it could only use offensive methods and completely rely on its own vast power. How could it know anything about close combat? Encountering Xiao Hua, whose spiritual power was not weaker than the gigantic spirit, he was not afraid of his imprisonment at all. Moreover, the wishful staff was an opponent that could hit the gigantic spirit's body. His tilde outside the Brahma pagoda, Chi Chang'e stood at the top of the pagoda. He could see clearly from the outside, and the expression on his face was extremely ugly. He really didn't expect that Xiao Hua's spiritual power could be comparable to 81 artifact cultivators. He also understood in his heart that within this Brahma pagoda array, Xiao Hua couldn't fake it. He could only fight the gigantic spirit head-on. What was even more unexpected was that Xiao Hua actually had a demonic artifact, and this demonic artifact could even hit the artifact spirit. Could it be that? Chi Chang'e raised his hand, somewhat hesitant. Just as Chi Chang'e was thinking for a moment, the gigantic spirit's arms had been completely defeated by Xiao Hua, and all the scattered artifact spirits had gathered at the top of the Brahma pagoda. The Kunlun mirror was still fierce, and from time to time, it attacked the Brahma pagoda, which had lost its host. However, fortunately, the gigantic spirit's arms were just a formality. He could attack from all over his body, which was why he was able to block Xiao Hua. This kind of clumsy artifact spirit tempering method is only SOSO. Xiao Hua's figure was far from being comparable to the clumsy gigantic spirit. The wishful staff could always defeat the gigantic spirit's body. Xiao Hua couldn't help but scoff at this. When Xiao Hua flew to the back of the gigantic spirit, he roared, "You go to hell." Immediately, the wishful staff was raised high and hit the gigantic spirit's back extremely heavily. Although the gigantic spirit's body was huge and the wishful staff was only 3 feet in size, as the wishful staff hit, there was a loud rumbling sound. The gigantic spirit's back collapsed rapidly, and a fist-sized black hole was created by the wishful staff. Moreover, this black hole did not heal, and then it expanded again. It was like a beast's mouth, swallowing the entire gigantic spirit. Naturally, after the artifact spirits that formed the gigantic spirit's body were swallowed by this black hole, they scattered and could no longer form the gigantic spirit. They flew to the top of the pagoda. -11. Chapter 2766. This giant spirit is the same as the Brahma pagoda. Although there are only 81 weapon spirits, the flashing brilliance can connect together and actually form a Dharma idol that is several jong tall. This 7-spirit mountain still has some foundation. Xiao Hua put away the wishful staff and narrowed his eyes as he looked at the top of the pagoda. He thought to himself, if this young master's phoenix celestial body was still here, wouldn't it be several times more powerful than this bullshit weapon spirit? Damn it, this won't do. This young master wants to see the heavenly law embodiment technique of the devil world and see if I can cultivate another Dharma idol. Shua Tilda, seeing that the 81 weapon spirits had all gathered at the top of the pagoda, all the weapon spirits began to boil again. An indescribable fluctuation came from the top of the pagoda. Obviously, the top of the pagoda was the center of the entire Brahma pagoda's array. Wu Tilda, a strange sound like the wailing of ghosts and howling of wolves came from the top of the pagoda. Then, a cold wind blew across the cliff, and the sharp sound did not stop. What kind of trick is this? Xiao Hua frowned. A little bit of dark green color came out from the top of the pagoda. Suddenly, this dark green color lit up all the weapon spirits, and the brilliance of the weapon spirits flashed rapidly. Woo! Another extremely resounding sound came. All the weapon spirits suddenly turned into swords. The 1-foot-long brilliance was like a flying sword, and with a tail behind it, it came crashing down. Ha 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 tilde in the end, they are still sword cultivators from the Huan country. They are still unable to break free from the shackles of sword cultivation. Xiao Hua laughed and pointed his finger at the Kunlun mirror. The tricolored brilliance on the mirror spread out and blocked Xiao Hua's body, blocking the entire lower half of the Brahma pagoda. However, contrary to Xiao Hua's expectations, when these flying swords fell in front of the tricolored brilliance, they suddenly accelerated and rushed through the brilliance like meteors falling from the sky. The defense of the Kunlun mirror was actually ineffective against these flying sword. Ah! Why is that? Xiao Hua was stupefied, but soon after, he was greatly shocked. He also encountered this situation when he killed Qin Jian. Weren't these the soul swords used by the sword cultivators of the Huan country? Ayo, not good. Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent. As he cried out in alarm, the soul strands within the mysterious dark cloud quickly rushed out from the law eye soul mark between his eyebrows. Every strand of soul rippled violently as they formed a strange net, blocking Xiao Hua's path. Wu tilde, a series of shrill sounds rang out, as if a whirlwind had been set off in the entire Brahma Pagoda's great array. The dozens of soul swords were actually blocked by Xiao Hua's soul threads. They were like flying insects that had fallen into a spider's web, flapping up and down, but they were unable to break free. As for Xiao Hua, it was clear that he had reached his limit to resist the dozens of soul swords by himself. His glabella felt a sharp pain as he tried his best to block the soul swords. If it was said that he had the will to destroy these dozens of soul swords, he was still lacking in strength. But at this moment, Xiao Hua's figure appeared, and a panicked voice sounded, "Big brother, oh no." Someone slipped through the net. With a sweep of his divine sense, Xiao Hua understood what was going on. Although he had used his soul strands to block several dozen soul swords, there were still close to 10 soul swords that had passed through his soul strands, and were heading towards Xiao Maro, who was at the bottom of the pagoda. Go! Xiao Hua turned pale with fright. He knew that with Xiao Mao's cultivation, there was no way he could block the soul swords. He hastily pulled out many soul strands and chased after the soul sword. Unfortunately, the soul swords were like lightning, and at the same time Xiao Maro was calling for help, they had already pierced into his glabella. Xiao Mao's cries stopped, his eyes closed, and he fainted. It seemed that Xuanyan School's contribution in the great battle of Dao and Sword was about to be destroyed. Xiao Hua's eyes were about to crack, and he was extremely regretful of his negligence. However, his soul strands were still extremely far away from Xiao Mao. Xiao Hua couldn't think of any good way to deal with the soul swords other than his soul strands. Even if he wanted to call out the little white dragon, it was too late. At this critical moment, just as the dozens of soul swords were about to pierce Xiao Mao's glabella, a soft boom sounded. It was as if a ball of mist had exploded, and a ball of dark green brilliance appeared from Xiao Mao's glabella. That brilliance was like a ball of runes, and it rapidly flashed, blocking the dozens of soul sword. Ah! Xiao Hua was dumbstruck. This looks like green seal script. Just as this thought appeared in Xiao Hua's mind, that rune suddenly dispersed. It really did look like a green seal script, and it spiraled around the dozens of soul swords. Then, the brilliance faded, and the rune rapidly shrank, turning into a ball smaller than the tip of a needle, and shrank into Xiao Mao's glabella. Xiao Hua's divine sense went out, and he saw that Xiao Mao was still unconscious, but there was no change in his aura. Those dozens of soul swords simply didn't have any effect on him. Xiao Hua couldn't help but secretly rejoice. However, when Xiao Hua saw the dozens of soul swords trembling on the soul strands, a fierce look appeared in his eyes. Come! Hundreds of soul strands escaped from the net, and wrapped around one of the soul swords, and without hesitation, sent it into his glabella. And when that soul sword fell into the mysterious dark clouds, it couldn't maintain the shape of a soul sword, and reverted to the appearance of a weapon cultivator. That weapon cultivator's soul was entangled by the soul strands, and he couldn't move at all. He tried his best to struggle free, and he appeared to be extremely panicked. Xiao Hua sneered. If you knew this would happen, why did you do it in the first place? Of course, this young master wanted to be merciful, but you forced me step by step, and in the end, you actually wanted to use soul sword. Qi Chang'e didn't even put your lives in his eyes, so why should this young master be stingy? Then, Xiao Hua's primordial spirit descended from the pure spirit sky, and like a god, he opened his mouth and swallowed that soul. An indescribable feeling of satisfaction came from Xiao Hua's primordial spirit, and it made Xiao Hua feel extremely comfortable. Then, Xiao Hua didn't hold back anymore, and swallowed 10 weapon spirits in a row. And after swallowing 10 weapon spirits, his primordial spirit didn't feel full at all, as if even if there were 100 weapon spirits, he would still be able to swallow them all. However, at this moment, a ray of light fell from the top of the pagoda, and Qi Chang'e's voice came from the top of the pagoda. Xiao Hua, you've already won. Release my 7 Spirit Mountains disciples, and this chi will immediately remove the Great Formation. Don't. Xiao Hua sneered. This Great Formation hasn't been broken yet, and this Xiao is still doing his best to resist. If you go easy on me like this, it won't be easy to explain to Senior Hua Jian. Sigh, please don't joke around, sir. Qi Changyi fell into the Great Formation, and smiled bitterly. Out of the 81 disciples who set up the Great Formation of my Brahma Pagoda, 24 have already fallen. This Great Formation is far from the previous Great Formation. Sir, please release the other disciples, and my 7 Spirit Mountain will keep our promise and won't make things difficult for you. Is that so? Xiao Hua sneered. This Xiao doesn't seem to see your sincerity. All right. Qi Changyi clapped his hand, and a thumb-sized jade ring appeared. He waved his hand, and the jade ring drew an arc in the air before landing in front of Xiao Hua. This is the secret technique for forging weapon spirits that this Qi promised before. It's my 7 Spirit Mountain secret, and now it belongs to you. Oh, you're actually this generous? Xiao Hua almost didn't dare to believe his eyes. How could the 7 Spirit Mountain give out the secret technique so easily? Moreover, this jade ring looked very simple and unadorned. It should be a strange item, so how could Qi Changyi casually take it out from the 7 Spirit Mountain? This Qi can swear a sword oath that this contains the secret technique for forging weapon spirits that my 7 Spirit Mountain obtained, and this Qi promised you before. Qi Changyi looked at the dozens of soul swords that had already dimmed, and said urgently, Sir, you can release my 7 Spirit Mountain disciples now. Tilda, how can that be? You've already fulfilled your promise to me. But what about my brother? Xiao Hua pointed at Xiao Mao, who had fainted at the bottom of the pagoda. He was injured by your 7 Spirit Mountain disciples, so no matter what, you should compensate him, right? What? Compensate? Give Xiao Mao? Qi Changyi stuttered. This doesn't seem to be part of our previous agreement. Yes, it's not part of our agreement, Xiao Hua said with a smile. Our agreement was that this Xiao would destroy the Great Formation, but this Great Formation hasn't been destroyed yet, right? Also, you seem to have broken the agreement and barged into the Great Formation. Furthermore, this Xiao even suspects that you're controlling the Great Formation from the outside. Oh, fine. Qi Changyi was truly at his wit's end. Looking at Xiao Hua's sinister smile, he gritted his teeth and said, What do you want? Xiao Hua smiled and extended a finger, waving it in front of Qi Changyi. What does this mean? Qi Changyi didn't understand. Then, his face suddenly revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. He pointed at Xiao Mao at the bottom of the pagoda and said, Sir, look, Xiao Mao has already woken up. How can this be? Xiao Hua didn't even look and hurriedly transmitted his voice. Xiao Mao, if you want something good, close your eyes. Yes. This little brother understands. Xiao Mao's eyes were originally moving, ready to open, but after hearing Xiao Hua's words, he immediately closed his already slightly open eyelids, his eyes even more motionless. Qi Changyi opened his mouth, not knowing what to say. In the end, he looked at Xiao Hua and said, What does this mean? A Dharma treasure. Xiao Hua waved his finger and said with a smile, A Dharma treasure that's close to spirit Qi. How can this be? Qi Changyi shook his head without hesitation. My 7 Spirit Mountain is an artifact cultivator. How can we have a Dharma treasure? What's more, a Dharma treasure that's close to a spirit artifact. Then there's nothing we can do. Xiao Hua sighed. My brother was injured to this extent and is still unconscious. If it wasn't for a Dharma treasure, how could we wake him up? If he doesn't wake up, then these 60 or so 7 Spirit Mountain disciples won't be able to wake up either. Then let them accompany Xiao Mao. Qi Changyi sneered. He turned around and was about to fly to the top of the pagoda. Ayo, your 7 Spirit Mountain really doesn't have it. Xiao Hua hurriedly called out to Qi Changyi. We really don't have it. Qi Changyi answered resolutely. Then forget it. Xiao Hua said irritably. Forget about the Dharma treasure. Give your artifact refinement secret technique to Xiao Mao. Artifact refinement technique? Qi Chang'e shook his head even more. We only use our bodies to fuse with artifacts, we don't refine artifact. -11. Chapter 2767. Tell me, you have neither Dharma treasures nor refining skills. How are you going to compensate Xiao Maro? Xiao Hua glanced at the storage bag on Qi Chang'e's waist and sneered. Are you going to use the refining materials in your storage bag? When Qi Chang'e heard this, he became even angrier. Without thinking, he slapped his hand, took off his storage pouch and tossed it to Xiao Hua, saying, I have some materials for refining artifacts here. If you like them, then take them all. However, when the storage bag flew out of his hand, Qi Chang'e's expression changed. He seemed to have thought of something. However, Xiao Hua was so quick-witted. When he saw the storage bag fly out of his hand, he waved his hand and used heaven and earth sleeve. He grabbed Qi Chang'e's storage bag and sent it into the dimension without even looking at it. He said calmly, all right, since you have nothing, the things in this storage bag will be your compensation to Xiao Maro. It may not be much, but it's enough. Then, Xiao Hua said loudly, Xiao Mao, hurry up and thank Qi Chang'e. When Xiao Maro heard this, he jumped up from the bottom of the pagoda and cupped his hands. Thank you. Qi Chang'e was so angry that his nose was almost crooked. However, he still said with a bitter face, can you let them go now? Yes, of course. Xiao Hua nodded and turned around. Xiao Mao, go out first and see if your senior brother Li and senior sister are all right. Yes, I understand. Xiao Marozhong flew out from the top of the pagoda where Qi Chang'e had landed. Seeing Fairy Hongxia and Li Zongbao standing leisurely in the distance, he laughed and asked loudly, Senior brother, senior sister, are the two of you all right? Fairy Hongxia was confused when she heard the joy in Xiao Mao's voice. She looked at Li Zongbao and replied, we are naturally fine. What's wrong? Big brother, senior brother and senior sister are both fine, Xiao Maro said to Xiao Hua. Then, he looked up at Fairy Hongxia and said, Big brother and I are naturally fine as well. All right. Xiao Hua nodded and kept the soul strands. Without waiting for the soul swords to return to their respective artifacts, he ignored Qi Chang'e and flew out of the Brahma Pagoda's great array. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua didn't notice the slight smile on Qi Chang'e's lowered face. This smile seemed a little strange. However, this strange smile disappeared in a flash. Qi Chang'e suddenly thought of something and said loudly, Xiao Hua, I suddenly remembered something, let's talk after we get out. Xiao Hua didn't pay any attention to him, and swaggered off. Qi Chang'e felt helpless as he looked at the soul swords that were returning to their original positions. Xiao Maro naturally followed behind Xiao Hua. He didn't know what had happened to him and only thought that he was saved by Xiao Hua again. He was already used to being saved by Xiao Hua, so he didn't care about it one more time. However, when Xiao Maro flew out of the Brahma Pagoda, he felt his eyes brighten. It was as if the first rays of the morning sun were brighter and clearer. Looking at the ordinary scenery in front of him, his heart was filled with joy. He really liked the feeling of someone caring for him. Moreover, he had a feeling that he had just woken up from a good sleep. A kind of full spirit filled his entire body. Hey, what's going on? He had this feeling occasionally in the past. Involuntarily, Xiao Maro released his divine sense. However, just as his divine sense left his body, it was detected by Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua looked back at him and transmitted a message, don't be impatient. Xiao Mao's heart trembled. He hurriedly retracted his divine sense and obediently followed behind Xiao Hua. Darling Xiao Tilda Fairy Hongxia had long been paying attention to the entire Brahma Pagoda. When she saw Xiao Hua and Xiao Mao's figures fly out from the top of the pagoda, she hurriedly flew over. On the other hand, Li Zongbao stood quietly in his original position, looking around vigilantly. Xiao Hua smiled as he flew towards Fairy Hongxia. His divine sense naturally swept across the entire area. Just like Li Zongbao, he wanted to see if there was anything strange. When he saw that the entire Brahma Pagoda was only a few feet in size, he couldn't help but be stunned. Oh, this Brahma Pagoda is actually so small. Looks like This Brahma pagoda formation is not simple. Xiao Hua's eyes showed that he was deep in thought. Since it can shrink the size of the people who enter the formation, then, can it also reduce the power of the people who enter the formation? Although this Brahma pagoda does not have the faint power of the natural order of the Blood Drop Grotto Heaven, it is still very powerful. This 7 spiritual mountains should not be underestimated. Are you alright? Fairy Hong Xia flew in front of Xiao Hua. Although she knew that Xiao Hua was fine, she still couldn't help but ask. The concern in her eyes were obvious. Hihi, I'm fine. Xiao Hua was overjoyed. However, his face was still carefree. He waved his hand nonchalantly and said, "How can such a small trick be a match for me? Moreover, Xiao Maro is here. Breaking this formation is as easy as lifting a finger. You're just bragging." Fairy Hong Xia curled her lips and looked at Xiao Maro. His face was glowing red as if he had eaten a lot of nourishment. It seemed that he did not suffer any losses in the Brahma pagoda formation. Boom tilde, there was a slight tremor. It was like a rolling stone. Starting from the top of the Brahma pagoda, it started to collapse until it reached the base of the Brahma pagoda. One by one, the magical artifacts glowed and lined up in midair. In the middle of these magical artifacts was Qi Chang'e, who had an extremely unnatural expression. Swoosh swoosh tilde, rays of light flashed past like clear water. These magical artifacts began to reveal the figures of the disciples of the 7 spiritual mountains. However, at this time, the disciples of the 7 spiritual mountains were no longer as arrogant and disdainful as before. Other than their dispirited expressions, their eyes were filled with fear. When their gazes swept past Xiao Hua and Xiao Mao, it was like a mouse that had seen a cat. They quickly dodged and swayed left and right, as if they were scared out of their wits. After the Brahma pagoda disappeared, another 20 magical artifacts appeared in its original position. These magical artifacts glowed faintly and seemed to be of good quality. "You guys, keep these for now." Qi Chang'e raised his hand as if he was going to put these magical artifacts into his storage bag. However, his hand was in midair and he pointed at the disciples beside him. "Damn it, we've been tricked." When Xiao Hua saw these magical artifacts, he immediately realized. These magical artifacts were originally created by the disciples of the 7 spiritual mountains. However, their soul swords have been destroyed, so their low-level artifact spirits probably no longer exist. Although these magical artifacts can't compare to the Seal of Ocean Destruction, they're still very good. Why didn't I think of this at the time? Ji is also from the 7 spiritual mountains, so he's naturally the same as them. Of course, I don't want them, but Xiao Maro does. Wouldn't any one of them be better than the one he has now? Ayo, that's not right. These magical artifacts, why are they exactly the same? I understand now. These magical artifacts are all used to set up the Brahma pagoda formation. These disciples of the 7 spiritual mountains were specially raised. They probably have the same bloodline, grew up together with you, and fused the same magical artifacts into their bodies. That's why they were able to form the same formation and the same artifact spirit. These magical artifacts, even if they lost their artifact spirits, the 7 spiritual mountains would never leak them out. Qi Chang'e definitely wouldn't dare to take the initiative to give one to himself. However, Xiao Hua still shouted, "Ayo, you don't seem to be honest. Aren't these just magical artifacts? You're saying that the 7 spiritual mountains don't have any magical artifacts of their own?" "No, I don't want the storage bag anymore. I'll exchange it for this magical artifact." "Ah, really?" Qi Chang'e raised his eyebrows and was overjoyed. However, he immediately realized that his expression was inappropriate and hurriedly covered it up. These magical artifacts are the heirlooms of the 7 spiritual mountains. How could I give them to you? Then, he frowned again and said with some difficulty, "However, you did indeed break the formation and Xiao Maro was indeed injured. My previous methods were also a bit extreme. How about this? I'll make the decision. If you return the storage bag to me, I'll compensate Xiao Maro with a magical artifact." As he spoke, he waved his hand and a magical artifact fell into his hand. He looked at Xiao Hua with a smile. The change in Qi Chengyi's expression was quite obvious. Xiao Hua was just casually making a fuss. When he heard that Qi Chengyi was actually willing to exchange, he couldn't help but be stunned. Hihi, how could I give away something that's already in my hands? Xiao Hua's mind turned and he laughed mischievously. How about you set up another Brahma pagoda formation and I'll use this storage bag as a wager with this magical artifact. Hearing this, Qi Chengyi's expression became even more bitter. He didn't know whether he should give away the magical artifact in his hand or not. After thinking for a moment, Qi Chengyi said very earnestly, Xiao Hua, I was a bit too excited just now. I didn't think much and just threw the storage bag over. Actually, inside, besides some Qi refinement materials, there are also some miscellaneous items. These items are very important to me. Although this magical artifact is also a treasure of the 7 spiritual mountains and I might be punished by the sword school for taking matters into my own hands, I'm willing to exchange this magical artifact with you. Please return the storage bag to me. I'll be eternally grateful. Big brother. Xiao Mao's eyes flashed with excitement. He transmitted his voice, I think that magical artifact is pretty good, don't worry about it. Xiao Hua transmitted his voice in a low voice. This magical artifact is very important to the 7 spiritual mountains. Qi Chengyi doesn't have the qualifications to give it to me. Since he dared to do this, there must be something good in his storage bag. As he thought about this, Xiao Hua couldn't help but order his primordial spirit in the space to open the storage bag. At this moment, Xiao Hua's primordial spirit in the space already had a certain degree of mobility. Not only could it farm, it could even prune. Opening the storage bag wasn't difficult for it. Ayo, there's quite a lot of things. Xiao Hua opened the storage bag. There were quite a lot of refining materials, some spirit stones, and some strange items. When he saw a long white bone, he was overjoyed. Moreover, when the long white bone appeared in the space, it immediately flashed with lightning and flew to the pile of white bones from before. It was precisely where one of the thigh bones was. Damn it, I haven't found this bone for a long time, Xiao Hua thought to himself. Now that it's in my hands, how can I return it to you? -11. Chapter 2768. Seeing Qi Chengyi's strange behavior, Xiao Hua rolled his eyes and laughed, forget it. Since you're so troubled, I won't exchange it with you. Seeing Xiao Hua turn a deaf ear to his words, Qi Chengyi's expression became even more helpless. After thinking for a moment, he transmitted his voice to Zhongyu again, actually. I still want to tell you something. This. Ari, forget it, I'll be honest with you. There is something in this storage bag that I've just obtained. It can be said to be extremely important, but it can also be said to be fake. I'm going to hand it over to the Sword's Gate. If Your Excellency can return this item to me, this Qi will be truly grateful. Oh, something extremely important. The greedy Xiao Hua immediately had stars in his eyes. He transmitted his voice. What is it? This. I'm not sure what it is. Qi Chengyi smiled bitterly. It's because I'm not sure that I was careless. Also, this item is completely useless to you. Since you have no use for it, can you return it to me? Seeing that Qi Chengyi refused to say what it was, Xiao Hua's curiosity grew. He flipped his nascent spirit over and didn't find anything special. He thought to himself, other than that white bone, there's nothing good in here. Since this white bone is in my space, how can I return it to you? Hihi, since you can't even be sure, then what's the use of this item? Forget it, this item already belongs to Xiao, so you shouldn't think about it. That item is really useless to you, sir. Why don't you take this Dharma artifact? Qi Chengyi directly presented the Dharma artifact to Xiao Hua. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua turned a deaf ear to Qi Chengyi's earnest gaze and Xiao Mao's longing gaze. He waved his hand and said, it's not easy for you to come out. How can I let you bear the heavy punishment of your sect? This artifact. Xiao Mao can't accept it. Then, he looked up at the dozens of 7 Spirit Mountain disciples. When they saw Xiao Hua looking at them, they couldn't help but tremble and lower their heads. Xiao Hua said to Qi Chengyi indifferently, you came here on Senior Huajian's orders to stop us. You and I made a bet with our strength. Now, we've already broken your 7 Spirit Mountains Brahma Pagoda formation. This Xiao will say it clearly in advance. We came to Hun country today to gain experience and have no other intentions. Therefore, for this first round, this Xiao has already shown mercy. Today, this Xiao reiterates that if any sword cultivator disciple dares to harass us again, we will not show mercy. Your Excellency, remember these words. Otherwise, if more disciples of Huan country bleed in the future, don't blame this Xiao. Oh, all right. Qi Chengyi smiled bitterly. My 7 Spirit Mountain has already fulfilled Senior Hua Jian's request. We will not disturb you in the future. As for the other sword friends, I can only inform them. As for whether or not they will listen, I cannot guarantee. Furthermore, Your Excellency. Qi Chengyi seemed like he wanted to say something, but Xiao Hua didn't allow him to be long-winded. He waved his hand and said, Your Excellency, just pass on the message. As for whether they live or die, that's their choice. Finished talking, Xiao Hua waved his hand and said to Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao, let's go. If they find it, this Xiao doesn't mind using blood to write the name of the terrifying phoenix on the soil of Huan country. That's right. Li Zongbao said calmly. The more sword cultivators we kill, the greater our fame. Then, the 4 of them flew into the sky and left. After watching the 4 of them fly far away, Qi Chengyi's face revealed a trace of seriousness and a cold smile. However, he turned his head to look at the dozens of 7 Spirit Mountain disciples who were lucky enough to survive and said in a low voice, What happened in the Brahma Pagoda? How did your soul swords get destroyed by 2 Dao sect disciples? The few disciples who had drawn their swords looked at each other with puzzlement on their faces. They said in a low voice, reporting to Uncle Master Qi, we transformed into weapon spirits, so we weren't too clear about the situation in the Great Formation. We only felt that when we attacked with our soul swords, he also had a soul technique defense. He actually blocked our soul swords. Moreover, when we touched his defense, fear and panic appeared in our soul swords. It was as if we were in danger of being swallowed by him at any moment. Ah! How? How is that possible? Qi Chengyi was shocked. According to what you said, isn't Xiao Mao even more terrifying? We didn't attack Xiao Mao, so we didn't know. The disciple replied in a low voice. You transformed into soul swords, so of course you didn't see it. Qi Chengyi sighed. I saw it clearly. Xiao Mao was hit by some of the disciples' soul swords. However, there was a strange green brilliance on his body. It seemed similar to a soul cultivator. Our soul swords were obtained from a soul cultivator. The disciple smiled. If Xiao Mao is related to soul cultivators, I'm afraid he really treated us as nourishment. But Xiao Hua doesn't have any strange, divine ability. Qi Chengyi frowned, somewhat puzzled. We don't know either. Many disciples lowered their heads. It was obvious that Xiao Hua's influence on them had not dissipated. Forget it, you can go back. Qi Chengyi waved his hand and said to the disciples in the distance, order the other disciples to retract my previous order. Don't chase after these Dao sect cultivators. Yes. The disciples received the order and sent out flying swords. Not long after, a first-grade illusory swordsman flew over and shouted from afar, Senior Brother Qi, why did you let them go so easily? If Senior Huashan pursues this matter, how will we explain it? Explain it. Qi Chengyi looked at the swordsman in the distance and sneered. Junior brother, it's easy for you to say that. That's the terrifying phoenix that killed Qin Jian. How do you expect me to stop it? Our 7 Spirit Mountains sword array is not to be trifled with. Didn't you? The junior brother was about to say something when Qi Chengyi waved his hand and said indifferently, let's not talk about it. Why? The junior brother asked curiously. Did you not set up the array? Sigh. Qi Chengyi shook his head. Of course I did. Moreover, the Brahma Pagoda array of 81 people was easily broken by them. Also, then, Qi Chengyi roughly explained the situation. The junior brother was stunned and asked curiously, Senior brother, Why didn't you set up a Brahma pagoda array of 180 people? TMPH, if you used a 180 people array, what's the difference between that and me personally? Yeah, why didn't you go? The junior brother asked curiously. TMPH, you don't know anything. Qi Chengyi said softly. If Xiao Hua and the others could kill Qin Jian, why can't they kill us? I admit that I'm no match for Qin Jian. However, our seven-spirit mountain can't ignore Senior Huashan's orders. The seniors in our sect entrusted this matter to me because Xiao Hua and the others are Foundation establishment cultivators. I used a Brahma pagoda array of 81 people because I was confident that I could kill an early-stage golden core cultivator. Since this array didn't work, I can naturally explain it to our sect, and our sect can also explain it to Senior Huashan. If I personally went, even if I died, who would know? But, Senior brother, you can explain it, but what about our seven-spirit mountain? How can we explain it to Senior Huashan? The junior brother sighed again. Hee. This. I naturally have a plan. With that, a sword light appeared under Qi Chengyi's feet, and he flew up. Senior brother, hurry up and tell us, what's your plan? The junior brother hurriedly chased after him and asked softly. Qi Chengyi's voice came from the wind. I have two plans. The first one is that I have a secret technique in my storage bag that allows me to fuse with my body into an artifact. It's a secret technique that everyone in our seven-spirit mountain knows. Although that secret technique, it's still our seven-spirit mountains. How could you? The junior brother's voice became softer and softer. Think about it. Our seven-spirit mountain has no use for this secret technique. What if a Dao sect cultivator wants to learn it on a whim? Qi Chengyi's voice also became softer. Moreover, our sect seniors would allow it. Ha, I understand. You're the second one. The junior brother laughed cunningly. The second one. Qi Chengyi's voice was almost inaudible. Xiao Hua didn't know that Qi Chengyi, whom he had a good impression of, had set up so many obstacles for him. At this moment, he was still proudly lecturing Xiao Mao. Xiao Mao, don't be greedy for that artifact. Although that artifact's quality isn't bad, to be honest, don't you think that there's a seven-spirit mountain disciple's soul in it? You won't feel safe using it in the future. Don't worry, Qi Chengyi's storage bag has plenty of materials for refining artifacts. When I have time, I'll personally refine one for you. Ah, big brother. You know how to refine artifacts. Xiao Mao's originally depressed heart instantly became excited. This. Xiao Hua realized that he had let it slip, so he didn't try to hide it. I do know how to refine a little bit. Otherwise, I wouldn't have asked him for the forging method for an artifact spirit. Big brother, I really admire you. What else can't you do besides giving birth? Xiao Mao asked with a smile. TMPH, although I don't know how to give birth, can the child be born without me? Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows and said proudly. Fairy Hong Xia, who was originally beside Xiao Hua, immediately blushed. She glared fiercely at Xiao Hua, then flew forward in embarrassment and anger. Xiao Mao elbowed Xiao Hua. Although he didn't say anything, the playful smile in his eyes was obviously laughing at Xiao Hua for blowing his own trumpet. Xiao Hua naturally chuckled and shrugged his shoulders with a helpless expression. Xiao Mao already had a dual cultivation partner, Qin Jian, who had the same name as Qin Jian, so he naturally knew what to do at this moment. He didn't say anything and flew to Li Zhongbao's side, as if he wanted to ask for advice, leaving Xiao Hua alone behind. Xiao Hua was helpless. He glared at Xiao Mao's back and could only fly to the front, to the left of the angry fairy Hong Xia. -11. Chapter 2769. Fairy Hong Xia looked at Xiao Hua coldly and ignored him. She flew up again and her speed increased by a lot. Xiao Hua knew how to be obedient and did not say much. He followed behind Fairy Hong Xia like a shadow. Fairy Hong Xia dodged a few more times, but how could she fly faster than Xiao Hua? Seeing that she could not get rid of him, she simply flew forward with a cold face. Xiao Hua turned his eyes slightly and sighed. Ari, Fairy Hongxia heard this and was slightly stunned. She was about to speak, but just as she opened her mouth, she came to a realization. She understood that Xiao Hua was playing hard to get, so she closed her mouth and did not reply. Xiao Hua could only sigh again. Fairy Hongxia only looked forward and turned a deaf ear to Xiao Hua's sighs. She did not know how many times Xiao Hua sighed. Fairy Hongxia pursed her lips and turned around. Why are you sighing? Are you unable to find a female cultivator who will give birth to a child with you? I want to see which female cultivator will give birth to a child with you. Hearing Fairy Hongxia's words, Xiao Hua was happy. Nonsense, he was not afraid of the female cultivator being angry and scolding. He was afraid that the female cultivator would not say anything. Ari, didn't you ask me just now? Xiao Hua's face showed a trace of seriousness and said sadly, Shwe, oh, right. Fairy Hongxia immediately thought of the matter before the battle with the equipment cultivator of Seven Spirit Mountain and said anxiously, Sister Shwe, what's wrong? I was a little jealous before. If Xiao Hua does not like it, I will not say it in the future. Ari, it's not like that. Xiao Hua's sighs became a habit and said, didn't I tell you before? The last time I went on the training, I was with Shwe. Xiao Hua then told Fairy Hongxia about Shwe's strange behavior. He took out the pink jade slip and said with a bitter smile, actually, ever since I came back from the last training, I have not seen Shwe. She has always been in closed-door cultivation. I always felt that she was hiding something from me. But when I asked her, she did not say a word. I feel that she is completely different from the Shwe of the past. Fairy Hongxia took the pink jade letter and looked at it with her spiritual sense before carefully returning it to Xiao Hua. She thought for a moment and said softly, I am also a female cultivator. If I put myself in her shoes, I think I can understand Sister Shwe's painstaking efforts. Oh, tell me. Xiao Hua also carefully keep the pink jade letter. It's actually very simple. Fairy Hongxia said bitterly, I once had the same thoughts as Sister Shwe. You Shwe too? Shwe's. I cans Shwe's, I to Shwe, to Shwe, I Shwe to Shwe's, Shwe. Fairy Hongxia looked into Xiao Hua's eyes. Although those eyes looked so pure under the rising sun, Fairy Hongxia felt that those eyes were so deep that she could not see the bottom. Moreover, in the deepest part of those eyes, there seemed to be a flame. She was like a moth flying into the flame, with a desire to jump in. How is that possible? Xiao Hua said in disbelief, why have I never thought of it? Shwe and I are both from cultivation families. My background seems to be lower than Shwe's. Fairy Hongxia could not bear to look away and said, but Shwe's aptitude seems to be much higher than hers. Since Shwe has such a feeling, she will naturally have it too. Xiao Hua pondered for a moment and did not answer. Moreover, from what you said, Shwe was a woman who dared to love and hate. But now she has become so gentle, accommodating you and listening to you. Isn't it because she changed for you? Fairy Hongxia analyzed, don't you like it? Actually. Xiao Hua hesitated and said with a bitter smile, I would rather Shwe be the Shwe of the past. Her current appearance makes me feel that it is very fake. I feel that this is not the Shwe in my heart. That's right. Fairy Hongxia laughed. This is a contradiction. Shwe is willing to sacrifice and change for you. But you feel that this kind of change is not worth it and might as well not change. What about Shwe who has never changed? You feel sick of it and actually in front of others. Laugh at Shwe. Damn it, why did it turn back around? Xiao Hua did not know whether to laugh or cry. He had really underestimated the ability of female cultivators to dig up old scores. Darling Xiao, do you think we female cultivators have changed for the better? Or is it better not to change? Fairy Hongxia asked Xiao Hua with a smile. Both are good. Xiao Hua's forehead was covered in sweat. One of you changed and one of you didn't change. Wouldn't I like both of you? Then wouldn't Shwe and I become the same? Wouldn't you be sick of it? Fairy Hongxia did not give up. How How do I answer this? Xiao Hua was instantly stunned. Fortunately, at this moment, Li Zongbao's voice came from behind them. Junior brother Xiao, do we still fly over like this? Xiao Hua was overjoyed. As expected of senior brother Li, his ability to save people in an emergency was extraordinary. Xiao Hua hurriedly shouted, Of course. Of course we have to fly like this. Could it be that this Huan country also has a teleportation array? Hee hee, big brother. Xiao Maro laughed. Senior brother Li is asking if we should take the flowing cloud flying ship. After all, we just broke the 7 Spirit Mountains Brahma Pagoda array. If we attract the attention of other sword cultivators, wouldn't we be in trouble? Oh, Xiao Hua slapped his forehead and sighed. Look at me, I'm so used to being poor that I even forgot about the flowing cloud flying ship that we rented from Chichiao sect. Quickly, we'll use the flying ship. Xiao Maro, you and senior brother Li control the flying ship. Big brother, take out the secret technique from the 7 Spirit Mountain and have a look. Maybe it can even repair senior brother Li's immortal piercing whip. After saying that, Xiao Hua turned his head and said, Senior brother Li doesn't have a magic treasure. This trip is really troublesome. I'd better hurry and think of a way for him. Seeing that Xiao Hua had successfully avoided her question, Fairy Hongxia laughed in her heart and snorted, I'll let you off this time. Think carefully for senior brother Li. Oh right, there's also Xiao Mao's magic treasure. I want to see how you're going to refine a magic treasure that suits him. Oh, right, Xiao Mao. Xiao Hua saw Li Zongbao take out the flowing cloud flying ship and activated his magic power. The flying ship enlarged and steadily stopped in mid-air and called out again. Oh, what's the matter, big brother? Xiao Mao was puzzled. He pointed at the flying ship and said, It won't be too late to tell me after I activate the flying ship. All right. Xiao Hua nodded his head and pulled Fairy Hongxia onto the flying ship. After the flying ship flew for an incense stick's time, Xiao Mao turned his head and asked, Big brother, what's the matter? Could it be that you want to refine a magic treasure for me? No. Xiao Hua shook his head and asked, Just now, after you fainted in the 7 Spirit Mountains Brahma Pagoda array, did you feel anything? Actually, Xiao Hua wanted to tell Xiao Mao about the situation just now. However, Xiao Mao interrupted and Xiao Hua changed his mind. Nothing. Xiao Mao asked curiously, I fainted when my eyes turned red. When Big Brother woke me up, I was going to open my eyes. However, after hearing Big Brother's words, don't mention it in the future. Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, Then why did you release your divine sense when you just came out of the array? I also felt that it was strange. Xiao Mao's face also revealed a strange expression. I felt refreshed, as if I had been in seclusion for a long time. Moreover, there had been such a situation before. Every time, my divine sense had greatly increased. So I wanted to release my divine sense to take a look. And the result? Xiao Hua was stunned. It has indeed increased by a lot. Xiao Mao did not hide it from Xiao Hua and the others. Just now, I secretly checked it. It has increased by more than 1 li. Oh, so that's how it is. Xiao Hua nodded slightly and beckoned, Come over here. Xiao Mao obediently came over and Fairy Hongxia replaced Xiao Mao's position. However, Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxia looked at Xiao Hua with a puzzled expression. Sit here. Xiao Hua pointed his finger in front of him and said in a low voice, just like meditating. If you encounter anything strange, don't resist. Okay. Xiao Mao obediently sat down. Xiao Hua looked at Xiao Mao's calm appearance and hesitated. He was very clear that the green rune between Xiao Mao's eyebrows was very powerful. He could only devour the soul swords one by one. That thing could devour more than 10 soul swords at once. However, Xiao Hua still released a strand of soul from the Law Eye spirit mark and carefully sent it to the space between Xiao Mao's eyebrows. With a light touch, it sank into his skin. Xiao Hua did not dare to go any deeper. He quietly waited for a moment. Seeing that there was no movement, he carefully sent the soul strand in. Strangely, until Xiao Hua sent the soul strand into the mysterious dark cloud, there was still no abnormality. Xiao Mao, do you feel anything? Xiao Hua asked in a low voice. No. Xiao Mao's eyes moved, but he did not open his eyes and replied in a low voice. Xiao Hua replied in a half-hearted manner. Xiao Hua's soul strand circled around the mysterious dark cloud. He saw that Xiao Mao's dark cloud was very different from his own. The layers of dark cloud were rolling violently, and there was no sound of thunder. Instead, there was a faint dark green color. Xiao Hua had already condensed his gold core. Naturally, he knew that after Dao sect cultivators condensed their gold core, their soul would gradually form Heaven Seal runes. These Heaven Seal runes were innate, and they were meant to protect the cultivator's soul. Otherwise, if a gold core cultivator was to fight against a low-level soul cultivator from Meng Mountain and had his soul crushed by the soul technique, wouldn't that be a joke? Moreover, the soul was the most important and mysterious part of a cultivator. As the cultivator's cultivation base increased, the soul would naturally be protected. After reaching nascent soul, the runes would become denser and more profound. Not to mention ordinary soul cultivators, even special soul techniques might not be able to break through them. -11. Chapter 2770. Should I give it a try? Xiao Hua had used his soul thread to enter Jiang Liu's soul, but he didn't dare to rashly probe into the mysterious dark clouds for fear of causing harm to Jiang Liu. But obviously, Xiao Mao's abnormality should be in the mysterious dark clouds, and this was Xiao Mao's secret. Xiao Hua hesitated. Forget it. After thinking about it, Xiao Hua felt that he had no reason to interfere with Xiao Mao's secret, even if he already regarded himself as Xiao Mao's big brother. Immediately, Xiao Hua took back his soul thread without hesitation, opened his eyes and said, "Okay, big brother, what do you want to say?" Xiao Mao asked curiously. Xiao Hua hesitated for a moment and said with a smile, "It's nothing. I just saw some strange things, and I want to find the reason. But everything is just a guess. If there are any clues, I will tell you." "Okay." Seeing that Xiao Hua didn't say anything, Xiao Mao naturally wouldn't ask. He just said, "Big brother, you should think about how to refine equipment for me. What kind of magic weapon do you like?" Xiao Hua asked with a smile. This. When it came to it, Xiao Mao hesitated. He thought for a moment and said, "A magic weapon like Senior Li's immortal piercing whip would be the best." "You think too highly of Big Brother," Xiao Hua said angrily. "That immortal piercing whip is a famous magic weapon of the Utopia faction. How can Big Brother refine it?" "Big brother, think about it, I will also think about it," Xiao Mao said with a smile. "Okay. Big brother, let's see." Xiao Hua nodded and said to Li Zongbao, "Everything depends on Senior Li. I have no sense of direction, so I will meditate first." "Up to you," Li Zongbao said lightly and continued to operate the flying boat. So Xiao Hua sat in the corner of the flying boat, and even the position was the same as before. He held the shabby ring in his hand and meditated with his eyes closed. Fairy Hong Xia sat for a while and then stood up again. Sometimes she replaced Li Zongbao, sometimes she replaced Xiao Mao. In short, the three of them flew toward the border of the Huan Kingdom according to the records in Fairy Hong Xia's jade pendant. In the blink of an eye, dozens of days had passed, and the sky of the Huan Kingdom had changed again. The days gradually grew longer, and the nights grew shorter. Sometimes, it would be daytime for 2 or 3 days in a row. The sun hanging in the sky would not set. On the other hand, the sword cultivators acted like Xiao Hua had threatened them. No one came to harass them, and the flowing cloud flying ship flew very peacefully. Looking down the airboat, Zhong Tai found the terrain had changed a lot. The ice sheet had disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by ice peaks and glacier. Among the glacier, there were many glacier and ice lakes. Many places in these glacier were not frozen. The azure waters of the lakes and rivers reflected the azure sky, which made Zhong Tai feel that the sky and the earth were the same color. Seeing such a pure scenery, not to mention Fairy Hong Xia, even Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao sighed. Xiao Mao even said, "The scenery of the Huan country is so magnificent, it doesn't lose to the 3 cultivation countries. Why can't they just stay here? You even want to be on good terms with the 3 kingdoms of cultivation? Even if you call them the 4 cultivation countries, it's still good. What's the point of starting a sword war for no reason and causing so many people to die? Sigh. When Fairy Hong Xia heard this, she naturally thought of Ji Mingxiu and the others who had died in the sword tomb. H. The greed of humans is limitless. Li Zongbao said indifferently, after getting the Huan country, they still want the Shi country. After getting the Shi country, they naturally won't let go of the Meng country and the Lian country. Naturally, they will start a war. Besides, between sword cultivators and Dao sect, who is the orthodox? As the saying goes, those who walk different paths cannot make plans together. It's normal for sword cultivators and Dao sect to start a war. Didn't the soul cultivators also start a war with sword cultivators? If the soul cultivators are close to our Dao sect, it will be the same. Also, this place is bitterly cold, and there aren't any large spirit veins. Although the scenery is magnificent, it's impossible to cultivate. It would be strange if sword cultivators don't covet our Dao sect's spirit stones. Fairy Hong Xia said. Damn it, so that's how it is. Just as the 3 of them were discussing, Xiao Hua, who had been silent all this while, suddenly jumped up from the flying boat and cursed loudly, "That bullshit Qi Chengyi. I thought he really kept his promise and gave me a secret technique to refine an artifact spirit. In the end." TSK Fairy Hong Xia curled her lips. That secret technique is the secret of the 7 Spirit Mountain. How can they give it to you so easily? Why don't you use your heels to think about it? Hihi, I naturally know this. Xiao Hua smiled. Furthermore, I was already prepared. But I didn't expect that the thing he gave me would be such trash. Or should I say, it's completely useless. But, can it really refine a weapon spirit? Xiao Maro was still most concerned about this. Of course it can. Xiao Hua snorted, but, unless, you don't want to live anymore, just like those 7 Spirit Mountain disciples in the Brahma Pagoda array. When Li Zongbao and Xiao Maro heard this, they immediately understood. It wasn't that Qi Chengyi didn't keep his promise. What he gave Xiao Hua was indeed the method to refine a weapon spirit. However, what he gave Xiao Hua was the weapon cultivator himself, the secret technique to merge the body with the weapon. Only when Xiao Hua merged the weapon into his body and refined himself as the weapon spirit, would he be able to succeed. Xiao Hua naturally wouldn't do it. In fact, no Dao sect cultivator would dare to do such a thing. What I don't know whether to laugh or cry the most is. Xiao Hua looked at Li Zongbao and smiled. In Qi Chengyi's storage bag, there was actually a weapon cultivation technique. It was improved by the 7 Spirit Mountain and seems to be suitable for Dao sect disciples with a foundation. Could it be that this guy thinks, I will give up my Dao sect cultivation and become a weapon cultivator? A weapon cultivator's lifespan is very long and its attack power is also very strong. Fairy Hong Xia pursed her lips and smiled. Perhaps some disciples who are unable to break through will consider it. No matter what, I won't consider it. Xiao Hua smiled and said, the lifespan is long, but in the end, even if it becomes a weapon spirit, it will still be a weapon spirit without spiritual intelligence. Even if it uses the secret technique of blood sacrifice, it will still be a sin. At this point, Xiao Hua didn't say anything else. Although what Xiao Hua said was given by Qi Chengyi, most of it was just superficial knowledge in the ring. Just as Qi Chengyi said, the ring was definitely a secret technique to refine a weapon spirit. However, this secret technique was the same as all the mysterious secret techniques on the Dawn Rain continent. It was incomplete. Moreover, the worst thing was that this secret technique only had the second half and not the first half. In other words, the first half was extremely incomplete and only a few scattered words could be seen clearly. This wasn't considered strange. The strangest thing was that the words in the ring were actually words commonly used in Dao sect and not some green seal script or inscription. Of course, Xiao Hua didn't care too much about these strange things. After all, weapon cultivators and sword cultivators were also considered cultivators. Perhaps many of them were converted from Dao sect cultivators who were unable to break through. What he was concerned about was how to refine a weapon spirit. Leaving the secret technique aside, The latter part talked about how to use the blood spirit of the blood sacrifice and one's own blood to cultivate a weapon spirit, allowing the weapon spirit to grow and grow. Xiao Hua understood at a glance. Whether it was Fallen Gold Mountain's blood sacrifice or Yu Tong's use of Zhong Yuhe and Yu Qingtian's bodies to refine the yin-yang sword gourd, it seemed that they had all taken this path. Their secret techniques should be the same as this secret technique. Now, Xiao Hua has finally obtained the method of blood sacrifice. His technique was even more advanced and complete than Fallen Gold Mountain's. However, could Xiao Hua use such a blood sacrifice technique? He wouldn't even mention it to Fairy Hongxia and the rest. Blood sacrifice? Hearing Xiao Hua's words, Fairy Hongxia shakes her head and says, "Then let's not talk about the matter of humans eating humans. Don't mention it. Actually, this was the only path for Dao sect cultivators when there was no weapon spirit." Li Zongbao spoke. "According to what I know, the weapon spirit should have been cultivated using one's own blood essence. This weapon spirit was like one's own. Even after one's physical body was destroyed, one's soul could still reside in the weapon spirit. But later on, for some unknown reason, this technique was destroyed. Later on, there was a technique that used the soul of a demonic beast as a weapon spirit. The grade of the demonic beast could be used to forge the weapon spirit. But now, even demonic beasts are gone. Cultivators can only use blood sacrifice to nurture the weapon spirit. As for weapon cultivators, it was the same as the earliest method of cultivating weapons. Ouch! Hearing Li Zongbao's words, Xiao Hua suddenly hit his forehead and cried out, "Why am I so stupid?" Then, without saying another word, he hurriedly sat down cross-legged and took out the ring. He immersed his spiritual will in it, as if he was carefully comprehending it. Li Zongbao was a little confused. It seemed that this was the legendary "the speaker has no intention of listening." Xiao Maro and Fairy Hongxia were naturally puzzled as well. Thinking about what Li Zongbao had said, and then thinking about what Xiao Hua had said, the two of them were even more confused. However, seeing Xiao Hua gradually become happy, the two of them knew that Xiao Hua had comprehended something again. Sure enough, in less than an hour, Xiao Hua jumped up and stretched out his hand. "Senior brother Li, congratulations. Why are you so happy?" Li Zongbao asked indifferently. It seemed that other than reviving Cai Zhuoxia, there was nothing else in this world that could move him. "Senior brother Li, don't you want to restore the fairy whip? Or even turn it into a spiritual weapon?" Xiao Hua smiled. "Oh, really?" Li Zongbao could not help but raise his eyebrows. Yes, this was the fairy whip. It had been with Li Zongbao for so many years, but it was destroyed by the spirit swallowing bugs in the spirit-devouring formation. Li Zongbao was even willing to throw away such a damaged magic weapon. Now that he heard that Xiao Hua could restore the fairy whip and even upgrade it into a spiritual weapon, how could he not be tempted? "Well, I have some confidence," Xiao Hua said with a smile. "Anyway, your fairy whip has been destroyed. Why don't you let me practice with it?" -11. Chapter 2771. Practice. Practice. Even Li Zongbao, who was as calm as Li Zongbao, who thought he already knew Xiao Hua very well, couldn't help but be stunned. He said in surprise, You want to use my immortal piercing whip, to practice?" "Yes. Can't I?" Xiao Hua said with a smile. "Previously, I thought Qi Chengyi of the Seven Spirits Mountain had bad intentions, but I didn't expect to hit the mark by a stroke of luck. The tempering secret technique he gave me. Of course, it's not appropriate, and it's even flawed. But, I know how to refine equipment. And I also know some secret techniques. When all these secret techniques are combined together, this fairy piercing whip should have a 70% chance of being repaired, and a 10% chance of being upgraded to a spiritual treasure, 70% chance. That's called practice." Li Zongbao was speechless. "Oh, of course, Xiao Hua's work must be of the best quality. Only 100% chance, no failure," Xiao Hua said proudly. "This 70% chance is only for practice. If it fails, senior brother Li, please don't make it public." Xiao Maro was amused and said with a smile, Big brother, have you never failed before? Who said that? No one is a born equipment refining grandmaster, how can there be no failure? Xiao Hua knew what Xiao Maro was asking, so he said, but, if you don't say it, senior brother Li doesn't say it. Isn't this 100% chance? Ha ha ha. Xiao Maro laughed so hard that he rocked back and forth. Well, if there's a 70% chance. That's definitely not small. Li Zongbao was an elite disciple of the Utopia faction. How could he not know how difficult it was to repair this magic treasure? Even the equipment refining grandmaster of the Utopia faction couldn't give him a 70% chance of success. Even if it was only 50%, he could still laugh secretly. He left the fairy-piercing whip as a souvenir, and he wanted to take it back to the Utopia faction to repair it. Now that Xiao Hua said he had a 70% chance of success, how could he not be shocked? After the initial shock, an unparalleled trust rose from his heart. Yes, it seemed that in Li Zongbao's mind, Xiao Hua was really capable of anything except having children. Refining elixirs. Thinking of this, he could do anything. Li Zongbao suddenly recalled the elixir given by Fairy Hongxia in the spirit-devouring Great Array. Needless to say, if not for the miraculous Xiao Hua, who would be able to refine such a miraculous elixir? Thinking of refining elixirs, Li Zongbao, the rejuvenation elixir, was also refined by Xiao Hua. This thought, no matter what, the elixir's rejuvenation elixir was not be compared to an ordinary person, an ordinary person's life's life. A life was a life. Oh? Senior apprentice brother Li is worried. Seeing that Li Zongbao's eyes were somewhat blurred, Xiao Hua was stunned. Of course. Li Zongbao hurriedly retracted his mind, clapped his hand, and took out the immortal piercing whip and handed it to Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua, who claims to have to rely on him for everything except giving birth to children, how can I not believe you? Ha 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 tilde. No one thought that Li Zongbao would suddenly say something like this. They were all stunned. After thinking carefully, Xiao Marozian laughed loudly. While Hongxia Fairy's face was red, she glared at Xiao Hua, then turned to look into the distance. Alas, Senior Li. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. You can just let me repair your magic weapon. Why do you have to frame me? Do you know that repairing a female cultivator's heart is 100 times harder than repairing a magic weapon? Oh. Li Zongbao was stunned. Who? Just as he was about to explain, Xiao Hua's expression suddenly changed. He stretched out his hand, and the immortal piercing whip flashed and stored it into the space. Then, he used the heaven and earth sleeve technique and covered Li Zongbao's body. Buzz tilde tilde. An intense sword cry resounded from Li Zongbao's side. The space fluctuated for a while, and a dazzling yellow light flashed. Then, a 1-foot-long broken golden arrow appeared. That broken arrow only had the arrow tip, the arrow shaft was incomplete, and the arrow feather was missing as well. However, on this broken arrow, thin runes covered it, and it emitted an extremely strange fluctuation. As the fluctuation rippled, a golden light also overflowed on the arrow tip. Ha ha ha. As expected of a terrifying phoenix, your cultivation is beyond this old man's expectation. A strong sword light flashed from several hundred feet away in the air, and a robust old man wearing a sword robe appeared. This old man was about 50 years old, and his cultivation was at the 3rd grade of illusory sword. His hair was already snow-white, his eyebrows were thin, and his eyes were like a tiger's. There was a faint yellow light flashing inside. Following the appearance of this old man, the broken golden arrow in Xiao Hua's heaven and earth sleeve flashed again, and disappeared. Where do you think you're going? Xiao Hua sneered, and the magic power in his body surged. Just as he was about to store the broken arrow into the space, Xiao Hua suddenly felt that the broken arrow's location was suddenly empty. That thing actually escaped his control and disappeared. Ouch! This was the first thing that escaped from Xiao Hua's heaven and earth sleeve. Xiao Hua was somewhat surprised. The old man's body shone with a golden light, and his face revealed a look of disdain. About 10 feet in front of Xiao Hua, the broken arrow appeared again, and a ray of light returned to the old man's hand. Who are you? What do you want? Xiao Hua flew out from the flowing cloud flying ship, and coldly stood in the air, saying, when we met the 7 Spirit Mountain, we already made it clear to them. Facing the Seven Spirit Mountain, this young master only wanted to preserve the face of the sword cultivators, and did not use too much strength. From that day onwards, if any sword cultivator dares to harass this young master will definitely let them know how the word regret is written. Arrogant. The old man sneered, and turned to look at Fairy Hongxia and the rest on the flying ship, saying, "This old man is the Flat Mountain Sword Sect Sai Kong Yu. This old man originally wanted to ask you about the Divine Sword Secret Manual. Since you yourself admitted that you defeated the weapon cultivators of the Seven Spirit Mountain, then this old man will not say anything more. As long as you give the Divine Sword Secret Manual to this old man will return, and will not disturb your travels." What? The Divine Sword Secret Manual? What's that? Xiao Hua was stunned. Of course you won't admit it. Sai Kong Yu stretched out his hand, and the golden broken arrow flashed again. He said coldly, "The Divine Sword Secret Manual is a sacred item of the Sword Realm, and has been lost in the Sword Realm for hundreds of thousands of years. Now that it has reappeared in the Sword Realm, it was actually obtained by a weapon cultivator. The funny thing is that he didn't know, and it was even snatched away by a Dao sect cultivator. What use do you have for this item? Why risk your lives for it? Ha ha ha. This young master understands." Xiao Hua could not help but laugh when he heard this. This Qi Chang'e is truly sinister. Yes, now that he thought about it, when Qi Chang'e carelessly threw the storage bag to Xiao Hua that day, it was not carelessness, but pure preparation. Later on, he even used a Dharma weapon to exchange for the storage bag, and even sincerely told Xiao Hua that there was something extremely important in the storage bag. It seemed that Qi Chang'e had premeditated all of this. However, Xiao Hua could not say anything. After all, Qi Chang'e had already said that there was something extremely important in the storage bag, and he wanted Xiao Hua to return it. Xiao Hua only thought that the important item belonged to the white bone, and did not care at all. He had already made it clear that even if Xiao Hua returned to find Qi Chang'e, he would not be in the wrong. Moreover, Qi Chang'e and the Seven Spirit Mountains might turn around and ask Xiao Hua for the non-existent Divine Sword Secret Manual. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua was really happy. Judging a person, one could not judge by their appearance, or even their words and actions. One could only look at their heart. "Are you taking it or not?" Sai Kong Yu said coldly, "Don't think that you are invincible in the Sword Realm just because you killed Qin Jian. Back then, Qin Jian was defeated by me. Hehe, so that's how it is." Xiao Hua said with a smile, "I reckon that there are many swordsmen in the Huan Kingdom who know that this young master has the Divine Sword Secret Manual. It's a pity that they don't dare to come because they know that they can't defeat Qin Jian. Only someone like you who is not afraid of death, and who defeated Qin Jian before, dares to come and join in the fun. Ha ha ha." Sai Kong Yu laughed very happily, and the brilliance on the broken arrow flashed rapidly. "My sword realm has hidden dragons and crouching tigers. How could a Dao cultivator like you know? To be honest, the swordsmen who went to the sword catacomb to fight are nothing in my sword realm. This old man doesn't care about that Lu Ruochang at all. I heard that under this girl's leadership, your Dao sect cultivators were defeated. This old man is ashamed of your Dao sect. A group of men were defeated by a female swordsman. Black Phoenix Sword Sect. Lu Ruochang is unknown in the Huan Kingdom." Xiao Hua said with a smile, "It seems that your Flat Mountain Sword Sect is the unknown one." As if Xiao Hua had poked his soft spot, Sai Kong Yu sneered, "My sword realm has never looked down on one's background. Even if this old man doesn't have a sect, as long as I can defeat Lu Ruochang, this old man can still be famous in the sword realm." Then he looked at Xiao Hua and said, "When this old man obtains the Divine Sword Secret Manual, this old man might be able to cultivate the Divine Sword. What does that bullshit Black Phoenix Sword Sect count for? But what if you can't obtain the Divine Sword Secret Manual?" Xiao Hua tilted his head and said with a smile, "Then, go to hell." Sai Kong Yu said fiercely, and then he attacked with both hands. Although there was no bow in his hands, and the broken golden arrow had disappeared, an extremely sharp feeling still came from between Xiao Hua's eyebrows, as if a sword chi had already pierced his skin. "This sword cultivator is strange. Xiao Hua was slightly stunned. At this moment, the golden sword light around Sai Kongyu's body flashed, and rapidly gathered in his right hand that was previously holding the broken arrow. Xiao Hua didn't dare to be careless. He clapped his hand, and the Kunlun mirror appeared in his hand. Under the urging of his magic power, a green brilliance flashed on the surface of the mirror, and a pillar of light rushed out. It turned into hundreds and thousands of green trees and smashed towards Sai Kongyu. -11. Chapter 2772. Obviously, Sikong-yu was also a little stunned. He did not expect Xiao Hua's magical treasure to be activated so quickly. Moreover, the pillar of light sucked in all the spiritual energy in the surrounding. Even the fine lines on the giant trees could be vaguely seen, and a rumbling sound could be heard again. What's the use of this kind of illusion? Sikong-yu sneered and made a hand seal with his right hand. All the sword lights were instantly obliterated, and then a strong golden light shot out from his hand seal. It was like a rising sun or a shooting star that tore through the sky. Wu tilde there was a faint sound, like a sobbing sound. The golden light suddenly cut across the sky, and in the blink of an eye, it arrived first and pierced into the green light. Wang tilde there was a rumbling sound in Xiao Hua's mind. He felt dizzy and was about to fall from the sky. The sound of the golden light was actually an extremely powerful sound attack. Sai tilde Xiao Hua did not dare to be careless. He used God's guidance naturally. Suddenly, he felt a chill in his mind and stabilized his falling body. Looking at Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxia, they were unable to resist the sound attack and had already collapsed on the flowing cloud flying ship. On the other hand, Xiao Maro was standing on the flying ship anxiously. He was in a hurry to control the flying ship, but he was completely fine. Seeing Xiao Maro control the flying ship to land on the foothills in the distance, Xiao Hua was relieved. He clapped his hands and secretly took out the yin-yang sword gourd. Oh! Sikong Yu's slightly bent body slowly straightened, and the sword light on his body slowly formed again. His slightly tired face showed surprise. Obviously, he did not expect Xiao Hua to be able to block the sound attack so easily. However, the place where the golden light landed was the thousands of giant trees. Swoosh! Like a sharp arrow streaking across silk, the green brilliance split the giant tree that contained the spiritual chi of heaven and earth into two halves. All of the giant trees flashed with a hint of golden light. Then, the green tree suddenly shattered, and the spiritual chi of heaven and earth surged out. The green brilliance was gone, and the broken golden arrow had already passed through the green brilliance and landed in front of the Kunlun mirror. A powerful force came from the Kunlun mirror, shaking Xiao Hua's arm. Go! Xiao Hua didn't hesitate and urged his magic power once more. At this time, not only was there a green brilliance, but also a blue and earthen yellow brilliance, forcefully stopping the broken golden arrow. Oh my! You! How do you have such magical power? Sai Kongyu was surprised. He knew how powerful the broken golden arrow was. Even a swordsman as strong as Qin Jian was defeated by it. According to Sai Kongyu, even if Xiao Hua was a cultivator in the late Jindan stage, his sword was enough to break a magic weapon. Xiao Hua's Kunlun mirror should be broken. The worst thing was that Xiao Hua couldn't easily block such a heavy blow with the Kunlun mirror in his hand. This guy is a body cultivator. Sai Kongyu was suddenly enlightened. Only a pair of arms that had the strength of 10,000 katis could compete with his broken golden arrow. However, just as Sikong-yu was about to form his sword again, Xiao Hua opened his mouth, and two green and red sword lights rushed out, flying straight at Sikong-yu's neck. Oh! Flying sword? You know about flying swords. Looking at this authentic sword domain flying sword, Sikong-yu was dumbfounded. Of course, on Xiao Hua's body, sword lights appeared, and a heart-shaped sword intent formed in the sword light. Illusory sword. Illusory sword 3rd grade. You! Sai Kongyu was shocked. However, at the same time, the green and red sword lights had already stabbed in front of him. The real sword chi and sword lights were like a biting cold autumn wind, scraping against his skin. Sai Kongyu opened his mouth, and the small life sword flew out, stabbing at the dream executioner. He didn't dare to recklessly condense the sword energy in his hand anymore, but his whole body flashed violently, and his whole body gradually revealed a golden color. Obviously, Sai Kongyu was about to transform into a sword. A huge sword like a broken golden arrow gradually formed in the air. Xiao Hua's dream executioner was blocked by Sai Kongyu's small life sword, and the mountain splitter couldn't do anything under Sai Kongyu's sword transformation. Whoosh! Xiao Hua also didn't hesitate and withdrew his 2 flying swords. Terrifying Phoenix. I didn't expect you to have the cultivation of a sword cultivator. I'm afraid no one knew about this. Sai Kongyu's voice was like the cry of a sword. However, even if you're a 3rd grade illusory sword, you can't transform into a sword like this, old man. Today, I'll let you see the power of my sword domain transformation. As he spoke, the broken golden arrow that was held by the Kunlun mirror suddenly disappeared, and when it reappeared, it was actually beside the huge sword that Sai Kongyu transformed into. Wang Tilda, the huge sword, let out a sword cry, and the broken arrow returned to the huge sword like a swallow returning to its nest. The huge sword that was originally shaped like a broken golden arrow suddenly increased in golden color, almost illuminating half of the sky. When Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes, the sword light once again shrunk, and a huge broken golden arrow appeared in the air. Suddenly, an irresistible sharpness came out from the broken arrow. Even the cold wind within 100 jong radius was cut by this sharpness. The broken golden arrow just appeared, and then it dimmed, as if it was about to disappear. Not good. At this moment, how could Xiao Hua not know that the broken arrow that Sai Kongyu transformed into wanted to hide in the air and kill him? He hurriedly waved his daoist robe, and the 2 green and red lights from the yin-yang sword gourd rushed out again, and stabbed at Sai Kongyu just like the Dream Slayer and the Mountain Splitter. The Slaying Dream and the Mountain Slaying Sword were 2 beams of sword light. Each beam of sword light was green and red. The yin-yang sword gourd's Slaying Spirit Vital Light was also 2 beams of sword light. However, one was green and the other was red. The 2 beams combined were very similar to the Slaying Dream and the Mountain Slaying Sword. In this great battle, who could see clearly between life and death? Who could tell? Seeing the Spirit Slayer Vital Light fly out, Sai Kongyu didn't increase his power at all, and the entire sword body suddenly disappeared. Alas, Xiao Hua was somewhat regretting that he didn't use the Spirit Slayer Vital Light earlier. Now that Sai Kongyu had disappeared, how could the Spirit Slayer Vital Light find him? However, just as Xiao Hua was about to use the wind escape technique to fly away and take back the Spirit Slayer Vital Light, the Spirit Slayer Vital Light pierced into the void several meters away from Xiao Hua, and the void was not between Xiao Hua and Sai Kongyu. It was even very far away. Oh! Xiao Hua was slightly surprised, but then he was overjoyed. He saw a wave of fluctuation in the void, and in an instant, a golden brilliance pierced through the void. The broken arrow that Sai Kongyu transformed into was actually forced out of its invisibility by the Spirit Slayer Vital Light. Not only that, Sai Kongyu's sword body could no longer maintain its sword shape under the 2 green and red sword lights, and an incredulous and shocked face appeared in the huge broken arrow. However, when this astonishment changed, the green and red Spirit Slayer Vital Light wrapped around the broken arrow, and with a loud puff, a surge of blood spurted out. Sai Kongyu's head flew out of the broken arrow, and the astonishment on his face would never change in this life. Buzz tilde then, with a mournful sound, the light of the broken arrow quickly disappeared, and Sai Kongyu's headless body fell from the sky. Fighting with this young master, your cultivation is still a bit lacking. Xiao Hua waved his hand, and Sai Kongyu's storage bag fell into his hand, and the 1-foot-long broken arrow also flew in front of his eyes. What is this? It doesn't seem to be a flying sword. Xiao Hua's gaze fell on the broken arrow floating in the air. It was still shining with an unusually tragic golden brilliance, and it was extremely dazzling. Big brother. Xiao Mao urged the flowing cloud-flying ship to fly over, and the shock in his eyes was needless to say. He had seen Xiao Hua kill Qin Jian before. At that time, Xiao Hua had spent a tremendous amount of effort to kill Qin Jian, and now, facing Sai Kongyu, who was also at the 3rd grade of the illusory sword, and had defeated Qin Jian before, Xiao Hua actually killed him without any effort. It had only been a few short years. Xiao Hua's strength, had actually undergone an earth-shattering change. It was simply unbelievable to Xiao Mao. Xiao Hua stretched out his index finger and placed it on his lips, indicating for Xiao Mao to be quiet. He said softly, "Big brother has always been low profile. Although he claims that he knows nothing other than giving birth, but Big brother still does not want others to know. Yes, little brother understands." Xiao Mao looked at Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxia, who were still unconscious on the flying ship. He chuckled and said, "Little brother will definitely not tell sister-in-law about this." As he spoke, his gaze actually landed on the broken golden arrow. "Oh!" Xiao Hua was stunned for a moment, then he laughed, "You brat, you actually dare to threaten Big brother. How so?" Xiao Mao shrugged his shoulders and said, "This is the first time little brother called sister-in-law. It is very awkward." "Ha ha ha ha!" Xiao Hua laughed and pointed at the broken golden arrow and said, "Just because you called her sister-in-law, she also has to give you a greeting gift. But her skin has always been thin, so Big brother will give it to you first." "Many thanks, Big brother." Xiao Mao was overjoyed. He just wanted to take a look at it, but Xiao Hua actually gave it to him. It could be seen how important he was in Xiao Hua's heart. He saw that Sikong Yu used this broken arrow and was not even afraid of Xiao Hua's Kunlun mirror. This object's origin was definitely not ordinary. As for the method to control it, wait until Big brother takes a look at Sikong Yu's storage bag, then I will give you the jade slip. Xiao Hua said casually. "Little brother understands, I will follow Big brother's instructions." Xiao Mao nodded obediently. Nonsense, since the object was given, how could he not give the method to use it? "Dispose of this guy's corpse, don't let others see that he was killed by a flying sword." Xiao Hua coldly pointed at Sikong Yu's corpse. "Oh!" Xiao Mao was stunned. Just as he was about to speak, he immediately understood that Xiao Hua was demonstrating his power. Little brother understands. Thus, Xiao Mao no longer asked and flew down from the flying ship. He flew towards the corpse. Xiao Hua could easily kill a third-grade illusory sword expert. In this Hung country, besides Huashan's sword, who else could he be afraid of? The three of them were suddenly full of confidence. -11. Chapter 2773. Xiao Hua boarded the airship and looked at Fairy Hongxia and Li Zongbao. These two were the best of the Dao sect's foundation establishment cultivators, but their cultivation was too low. Their illusory sword was too much, so it was normal for them to be injured by Sikong Yu. On the other hand, Xiao Mao seemed abnormal. Xiao Hua had already seen Xiao Mao's abnormality, so he was not surprised. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua did not know how to wake them up, so he could only stay at the side. Looking at Xiao Mao skillfully handling the corpses, Xiao Hua sighed, "Sigh, as expected of a disciple of a famous sect, you know everything. Although I'm also a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect, but what the Imperial Thunder sect gave me is really too little. Sigh, I'll just cultivate by myself." Xiao Hua sighed and ordered the primordial spirit in the space to stop working and check the jade slips to see if there were any secret techniques or cultivation techniques. Not long after, Xiao Mao returned to the airship and saw Xiao Hua standing at the side. Fairy Hongxia and the rest were still unconscious, so he knew that Xiao Hua could not do anything. After all, Sikong Yu used sound to attack, so who knew how he knocked them out? Although Xiao Hua's strength was enough to kill Sikong Yu, how could he dare to casually deal with them? Hence, Xiao Mao stood beside Xiao Hua with his hands hanging by his side. The airship was quiet, with only the cold wind blowing. Looking at Xiao Mao, Xiao Hua whispered, "Xiao Mao, don't you think?" Senior Li fainted. "Why didn't you faint?" "That's strange." "Ian, I know." Xiao Mao nodded. "When I heard that sound, I also felt extremely uncomfortable. My mind felt like it was turning upside down, but then the sound disappeared. I also don't know what happened." Sigh, "Actually it's not just that." Xiao Hua looked at Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxia, and whispered the situation in the Brahma Pagoda array, and then smiled. "Looks like your background is not simple. Maybe you have an extremely deep background." "What background? I don't know." Xiao Maro said sincerely, but I know that Big Brother is my big brother. I know very well how Big Brother treats me. My background is Big Brother's background. Xiao Hua did not comment. He had never thought of borrowing the background of others. Furthermore, both of my parents are dead. In this world, Big Brother is my only family. What other background did he have? It has nothing to do with me, Xiao Maro continued. As for what kind of background he has, he's just a tool for me to take revenge, and also a tool for you, Big Brother. Haha, don't be so heartless. Xiao Hua laughed. What kind of blood relatives can you have in this world? Big Brother is also happy. If you have a good background, it will be good for your future cultivation. This is a good thing. Yes, I understand. Xiao Maro was also happy, but soon after, he said with some sadness, actually, little brother is the same as senior martial brother Li. He hopes to find the opportunity to bring his lover back to life. Little brother also wants to see if the mysterious millions of Meng Mountains has. Hehe, don't even think about it. Xiao Hua resolutely waved his hand and said, I know that you miss your parents and senior martial brother Li, and you miss Cai Zhuoxia. However, they had already fallen, just like Tu Hong and Yu Meng. How could they possibly come back to life? It's better to let them rest in peace. Millimeter. This time, Xiao Maro didn't say yes, little brother understands, but rather agreed in a low voice with some unwillingness. Xiao Hua still wanted to say something, but he raised his eyebrows, as if he had thought of something. He closed his eyes for a moment, and then both of his hands began to form a spell. Under Xiao Mao's surprised gaze, Xiao Hua used a strange spell to wake up Li Zongbao and Fairy Hong Xia one after another. Strain. Xiao Maro thought to himself, if Big Brother knew this spell, he would have already woken them up. Oh, I understand. Big Brother wants to talk to me alone. Putting aside Xiao Maro, who was thinking about Xiao Hua's strange behavior, after Li Zongbao and Fairy Hong Xia woke up, they still had a splitting headache, and were rubbing their temples in anger. However, when they saw Sikong Yu's corpse that was cut in half, they still looked at Xiao Hua with a strange expression. Li Zongbao even whispered, Junior Martial Brother Xiao, you killed this third-grade illusory swordsman. Why did you make it so bloody? Aren't you afraid that people will know that you killed him? You killed Qin Jian once, and we can still take it as a fluke. If you kill this Sikong Yu, your strength, won't it be exposed? Although I don't know why you're hiding your cultivation level, but since you want to hide it, then hide it until the end. Seeing that Li Zongbao didn't blame him for being cruel, but wanted him to destroy Sikong Yu's corpse, Xiao Hua smiled, waved his hand in the air and said, I've fallen into Qi Chengyi's trap. The news that I have the Divine Sword secret manual has already spread throughout Huan country. This Sikong Yu is only the first. After that, I don't know how many swordsmen will come. My Divine Sword mystic manual is bait. However, Qi Chengyi used it as bait for me, but I want to use it as bait for the sword cultivators of Huan Nation. Let them come. If one comes, we'll kill one. If two come, we'll kill two. Sigh, that's right. There's still a long way to go before we reach Million Miles Mountain. I'm afraid it won't be easy to get rid of the sword cultivators. If that's the case, we might as well kill to stop the killing. Fairy Hong Xia sighed as she endured her headache. All right, then we'll go now. Li Zongbao was helpless and was about to activate the flying ship. Don't be hasty, Senior Brother Li. Xiao Hua smiled and said, you and Fairy Hong Xia have to leave a mark on Sikong Yu. Otherwise, I'll be famous in Huan country. That's right, Senior Brother Li. We're now heroes of the Great War of Dao Cultivators. Our names are famous in the war. Xiao Maro smiled and said, now that we're deep in Huan country, it's time for us to spread the name of Dao cultivators. The previous three made sword cultivators tremble in fear. Now, the four of us are enough to make the sword cultivators of Huan country flee. Good. That's how it should be. Li Zongbao thought for a while, then stretched out his hand and said, give me the immortal piercing whip. Xiao Hua smiled and took out the immortal piercing whip for Li Zongbao. Fairy Hong Xia also took out her innate primordial water and asked Li Zongbao to hit Sikong Yu's corpse. After a while, Xiao Mao and Fairy Hongxia activated the flying ship and rushed into the clouds. Xiao Hua pulled Li Zongbao to the side and said, "Senior brother Li, take out 9 drops of your blood essence." "What? 9 drops?" Li Zongbao hesitated. He understood that Xiao Hua was preparing to repair the immortal piercing whip. However, normal magic treasures only needed 1 drop of blood essence to repair. How could he use 9 drops? Furthermore, 1 drop of blood essence had an effect on a cultivator. 9 drops would be even more exhausting. Unexpectedly, Xiao Hua shrugged and said, "How can 9 drops be enough? I need 9 by 9, 81 drops of blood essence. And, it must be the blood of the heart. However, these 81 drops of blood essence can be divided into 9 days for me. Also, the time must be different. Blood of the heart." Although Li Zongbao's cultivation was as stable as a rock, he could not help but be moved by Xiao Hua's words. What Xiao Hua wanted was really too shocking. "You can choose not to give it." Xiao Hua smiled and said, "If you use my blood essence to refine it, it will be my spiritual weapon." "All right." If it were anyone else, Li Zongbao would have flatly refused. But looking at Xiao Hua's smiling face, although he didn't promise anything, Li Zongbao believed that if Xiao Hua didn't have a 70% chance of success, Xiao Hua absolutely wouldn't be like this. Then, Li Zongbao really took out 9 drops of blood essence from the heart. Looking at Li Zongbao's slightly pale face, even Fairy Hongxia frowned. Xiao Hua's actions were really strange. However, this was far from being strange. What everyone saw next was what was truly strange. Xiao Hua spat out a ball of red flame from his mouth. This flame was as calm as flowing water. There were no flames soaring into the sky, and there was no heat. Even Xiao Mao inadvertently used his divine thought to sweep it and found that his divine thought could not see this flame at all. This flame was indeed strange, but compared with Xiao Hua's sacrificial refining technique, this flame was not strange at all. Xiao Hua's hand seals were cast one after another, but the place where the seals landed was not the 9 drops of blood essence from Li Zongbao's heart, but the flame. Under Xiao Hua's control, the flame shuttled between the 9 drops of blood essence like a needle. Not long after, smoke and dust flew out from the blood essence. This is using the flame to refine the blood essence. Xiao Mao was stunned and almost forgot to control the flying boat. Big Brother's technique is really perfect. However, after waiting for another half an hour, Xiao Mao realized that what he thought before was really too far away. Xiao Hua was not only using the flame to refine the blood essence. Xiao Hua was simply using the flame as his own hand, and there was a faint fluctuation of a spell between the flames shuttling. This doesn't seem to be much. When a small shadow condensed from the 9 drops of blood essence, it emitted a bloody brilliance and stood up from the blood essence. Xiao Mao and Fairy Hongxia were really stunned. Isn't this the legendary Demon Realm's blood coagulation technique? Fairy Hongxia and Xiao Mao were extremely shocked, and they passed it to Li Zongbao, who was sitting next to them. At this time, Li Zongbao had gradually recovered. He had seen the blood shadow at 1,000 Feet Mountain. He could not understand Xiao Hua's spell, but from the blood essence, isn't it a blood shadow? Li Zongbao opened his mouth, but seeing Xiao Hua's concentration and the faint sweat on his temples, he did not say a word in the end. After a while, Xiao Hua waved his hand and the immortal perishing whip flew out of the space. "Quick!" Xiao Hua chanted, and the soul silk flew out from between his eyebrows, grabbed the blood shadow, and threw it into the immortal perishing whip. Then, he took out a few elixirs and put them into his mouth, closed his eyes and cultivated. -11. Chapter 2774. The immortal piercing whip was floating in front of his eyes. Yes, what Hongxia Fairy, Xiao Mao, and Li Zongbao saw was true. Xiao Hua was using the blood fusion method of the demon realm to help Li Zongbao refine the spiritual weapon. In fact, when Li Zongbao mentioned it before, he had already reminded Xiao Hua. Although the 7 Spirit Mountains artifact spirit forging technique was incomplete, the only thing missing was the most basic blood fusion technique. And who in this world could understand the blood fusion method better than the demons of the demon realm? Moreover, the refining of the seven spirit mountain spirit required a blood sacrifice and thousands of souls. But didn't the blood shadow technique of the demon realm extract the soul from the blood essence? Using the blood fusion method to condense Li Zongbao's 81 drops of blood essence, then using the blood shadow technique to extract the soul from it, then using the blood shadow technique to send the soul into the immortal piercing whip, and then using the seven spirit mountains tempering method to refine the soul and then awaken it. Wasn't this the method of refining the spirit of the seven spirit mountain? But the most difficult thing was that the blood fusion method of the demon realm couldn't use spiritual power. There was no magic art, only demonic fire, demonic blood, and even heavenly thunder. Xiao Hua used the power of heavenly thunder to temper the wishful staff and the ancient silver chain in the myriad thunder valley. At this time, he couldn't arrogantly use the heavenly thunder, so the wisp of spiritual fire in the Buddha's relic was just right. It was just that controlling the spiritual fire consumed too much true essence. Xiao Hua was already at the early gold core stage, comparable to the early nascent soul stage, but after refining the 9 drops of blood essence, he couldn't bear it. When he saw his immortal piercing whip floating in the air, a faint connection appeared in Li Zongbao's heart. This connection had been cut off by the spirit-devouring insects in the spirit-devouring array. Even if Li Zongbao had refined the immortal piercing whip in the early years, he couldn't stop the spirit-devouring insects from wreaking havoc. Now, under Xiao Hua's attempt, just as sacrificial refining made him feel something, Li Zongbao felt that as long as he had a thought, the immortal piercing whip could return to his hand. But he held it in. Without Xiao Hua's permission, he wouldn't even think about it. The flowing cloud-flying boat traveled through the first glimmer of dawn. The dawn of Huan country was just like the night from before. It was also extremely long. The deathly white sun hung in the east and did not rise in the slightest. It had already been 2 hours. Xiao Huatsai opened his eyes. A trace of joy flashed across his eyes. Previously, when he was in the flame forest swamp, he used the spiritual fire to break the blood-colored seal to save Xiangyang. He discovered that controlling the spiritual fire could improve his cultivation, but he had not used it for a long time. Today, when he used it, it was actually effective. Not only did it consume all of his true essence, even his unstable gold core stage had improved. This is really killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Why not? Xiao Hua thought to himself. Junior brother Xiao, how is it? Li Zongbao had 1,000 words to say, but he didn't know where to start. He could only ask in a low voice. It's fine. Xiao Hua waves his hand and says, little brother has underestimated this artifact spirit tempering technique. I'm afraid I won't be able to refine it again in a short period of time. It's fine. Li Zongbao also waves his hand. The immortal piercing whip is an inanimate object. Junior brother is a living person. Junior brother's cultivation cannot be delayed because of this inanimate object. Big brother Tilda, with your cultivation, you actually still need to rest. Xiao Maro had seen Xiao Hua's strength and is somewhat astonished. It's irrelevant. Xiao Hua knows that he is unable to explain and says with a smile, helping senior brother Li to refine the spirit artifact, big brother's cultivation can improve. However, the second time will be after 9 days. A few days is fine. Li Zongbao does not care at all. Fairy Hongxia also looks at Xiao Hua with heartache. Her previous anger has already disappeared. The 4 of them all thought that they would be able to refine it a second time after 9 days. Unfortunately, the flying boat only flew for 5 days before 2/3 grade illusory swordsman caught up with them. 2/3 grade illusory swordsman. Naturally, Xiao Hua does not put them in his eyes. Even 3/3 grade illusory swordsmen are not below him. However, what about 4 or 5? Furthermore, not all the sword cultivators of Huan country have the bearing to not attack Li Zongbao, Xiao Maro, and Fairy Hongxia. Facing 5/3 grade illusory swordsmen, Xiao Hua is somewhat tired of dealing with them. Xiao Hua is currently only at the early nascent soul stage, and the attack power of 3rd grade illusory swordsman is close to the early nascent soul stage. Xiao Hua being able to kill 3 third-grade illusory swordsmen at the same time is already not bad. If there are 2 more, he really can't do it. Not to mention 5 of them. At this moment, above the blue waves, the 4 third-grade illusory swordsmen have already transformed into swords. 4 huge swords of gold, orange, light green and grayish-black, each guarding a corner, trapping Xiao Hua in the center of the 4 symbols sword formation. Moreover, 4 sword forces rush out from the tip of the sword and directly press down on Xiao Hua's head and all around him. The 4 sword forces are like a palm that firmly grasps Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua's early gold core stage cultivator pressure is simply not enough to resist. Feeling that his surroundings are as solid as an iron bucket, Xiao Hua's face shows a bitter smile. Looking at the flying boat that has already landed on the waves, he secretly complains in his heart. He has already been fighting for dozens of days. The number of 2nd grade and 3rd grade illusory swordsmen that died in his hands is already more than 10. The corpses of these swordsmen. Xiao Hua simply didn't collect them. Like Sai Kongyu, they were thrown to the side as a deterrent. However, the development of the situation and the temptation of the Divine Sword Secret Manual has already exceeded Xiao Hua's expectations. Almost every 2 or 3 days, there will be a swordsman chasing after him, and these swordsmen chasing after him are all 2nd or 3rd grade illusory swordsmen. It can be said that the number of illusory swordsmen that Xiao Hua killed here is almost catching up with the number of illusory swordsmen that fell in the Great Dao Sword War. Although there are many swordsmen in the Huan country, they are after all 2nd and 3rd grade illusory swordsmen, which is equivalent to the middle and late gold core stage cultivators of the Cultivation 3 countries. If they fall one by one, how big of a disturbance will it cause? So, suddenly, 4 third grade illusory swordsmen appeared. Without any explanation, they surrounded Xiao Hua and the others. After one of them sent the flowing cloud flying boat flying, the other 4 surrounded Xiao Hua and beat him up. Just like before, they were all forced to reveal their illusory swordsmen by Xiao Hua, and before Xiao Hua had time to kill any one of them, these 4 people laid out the 4 symbols sword formation. What makes Xiao Hua the most angry is that the sword forces of these 4 people are firmly suppressing him. This pressure is his weakest link at this time, and now it is suddenly discovered by others. The unknown cultivator activates the huge golden sword. The huge sword trembles incessantly, and a hurricane suddenly rises. Although the huge sword has not yet flown out, the sword chi has already reached Xiao Hua's body, causing the golden light protecting Xiao Hua's body to flicker. Seeing the huge golden sword move, the orange-red, light green, and grey-black huge swords simultaneously emit a strong sword cry, and each of them flies up. The 4 huge swords cut through the air, and the sharp sword chi and dazzling sword light attack the space around Xiao Hua in an incomparably chaotic manner. At this time, not to mention a nascent soul cultivator, even a real illusory swordsman would have to face force with force at this time. Boom! The 4 huge swords chopped down at the same time, and an extremely small dot faintly appears above Xiao Hua's head. It seems like the void is about to be split open by these 4 huge swords. However, in the instant that Xiao Hua is about to be split into 4 pieces, Xiao Hua suddenly moves. As if he is using all his strength, he waves his hand. Kachacha in the sky, the dense dark clouds have already covered the sky at an unknown time. Hundreds of lightning bolts, covering the sky and covering the earth, fall down and densely hit the 4 symbols sword formation. The powerful confinement formed by the 4 third grade illusory swordsman loosens, and even the 4 huge swords slightly trembles. At this time, Xiao Hua's figure suddenly disappears again. The Demon Realm's concealment technique. Whoosh! The 4 sword lights flashed, but unexpectedly hit nothing. Although the 4 illusory swordsmen's figures are slightly exposed, it is clear that the strong sword cries rise and fall one after another, and they are all extremely shocked. However, when the sword cries rise, the sword power has not yet retreated, but at a place about 10 zhong high in the sky, an intense sword light suddenly appears, and a huge heart shape appears from the sword light. Immediately, Xiao Hua's illusory sword formation fiercely slashes at the light green and grey-black huge sword. At the same time, a wisp of spiritual fire flies out from Xiao Hua's body, which cannot completely transform into a sword. As soon as the spiritual fire comes out, the sword light immediately spreads out like a net and rushes towards the huge golden sword. Even a sword gourd flies out from the side of the spiritual fire, and the two green and red sword lights inside it rush towards the orange-red huge sword. Rumble tilde the light green and grey-black huge swords quickly rise and collide with Xiao Hua's huge sword. The strong sword qi rushed into the sky, and the sword light around Xiao Hua's body rapidly flickers, and his whole body is thrown high into the sky. His huge sword is still unable to resist the 2/3 grade illusory swordsman's huge swords, and can no longer maintain the sword shape. Xiao Hua's face is abnormally pale, and it is obvious that he was injured by the 2/3 grade illusory swordsman's head-on collision, but his bright eyes reveal an eager expression. Yes, Xiao Hua urged all the magic power in his body, and struggled to break free from the shackles of the four symbols sword formation, but he is still unable to break free from the sword formation. But this strike of his illusory sword formation blocked 2 of the 4 huge swords, and also caused the circulation of the 4 symbols sword formation to stagnate a little. What Xiao Hua wants is precisely this moment of stagnation. But when the execution spirit vital light bypasses the orange-red huge sword, a beautiful female illusory swordsman with a shocked expression on her face appeared from the huge sword. This female illusory swordsman opens her small cherry mouth without hesitation, and a lotus root-like small life sword rushes out, seemingly wanting to block the 2-sword light. Unfortunately, the orange-red sword light flashes, and the small cyan sword flashes extremely quickly. Simply not waiting for the female illusory swordsman to make any extra movements, it has already circled around her neck. An intense sword light flashes out from her snow-white neck, but it is annihilated in the blink of an eye, and blood spurts out from her body. As for the huge golden sword caught in the fire net, the sword light is covered with thin flames. This flame is very quiet, but it is also very bone-eroding. A tall and imposing middle-aged illusory swordsman is also forced to reveal his figure. -11. Chapter 2775. He seemed to be at a loss as he looked at the spiritual fire that could even burn the sword light. Then, a heart-wrenching scream came from his mouth. As soon as that scream came out, it was immediately covered by the sound of continuous explosions, only to see Xiao Hua's figure disappear again. Dozens of huge fireballs soared into the sky from below his body. Tender green and grayish-black huge swords violently vibrated within the fireballs. A male and female swordsman wearing strange swordsman attire also revealed themselves. They were the ones who activated the sword light, trying their best to block the fireball jade talisman that Xiao Hua threw. When Xiao Hua's figure flashed again, he was already above the middle-aged swordsman's head. That black and thick mace was already in his hands. Pu as if hitting a watermelon. Although the sword light above the middle-aged swordsman's head flashed violently, it was still unable to block Xiao Hua's strength. The green swordsman was an old woman. Seeing that something was wrong, she immediately wanted to escape. However, before her sword light flashed, a jade spring fell from the sky and wrapped the 2 huge swords in an instant. "Come and help me." Xiao Hua had already used up a lot of true yuan to activate the spiritual fire. Although the Buddha Surya did not use true yuan, he was still unable to support it. He hurriedly called for Fairy Hongxia. Fairy Hongxia was already on the airship, rubbing her hands. However, she did not dare to fly into the battle for fear that Xiao Hua would cause trouble. Hearing Xiao Hua's call for help, she did not dare to hesitate. She released her Ice Phoenix Dharma body and released a stream of innate primordial water, rushing into the primordial water. Innate primordial water. Seeing that Xiao Hua and Fairy Hongxia both had innate primordial water, the 2 grade 3 illusory swordsmen were stunned. At this time, they did not care about anything else. The sword light around them shone brightly, and the sword energy in their bodies also surged. A mountain-like grayish-black sword intent and a grass-like sword intent rushed towards one direction, wanting to break through the innate primordial water. A burst of sword light rushed into the primordial water, and the primordial water was actually split open. But right at this moment, 2 streaks of green-red spirit-slaying yuan light seeped into the primordial water once again. The old woman was scared out of her wits when she saw the murderous yuan light approaching. The yuan light was too sharp. The swordsman with the golden sword didn't have any power to fight back and died under the yuan light. This was all seen by the old woman. With a loud bang, a string of pitch-black pearls on the old woman's neck broke, and a thick black smoke poured out from the pearls. As soon as the smoke surged out, it immediately spread out. The wisps of smoke were like tentacles that were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. They intertwined with each other and seemed to want to form a strange shape. Even the wails of ghosts and howls of wolves could be heard coming from the black fog. However, when the spirit extermination yuan light streaked across the thick fog, the green-red light flashed and sliced the thick fog into 2 halves. All the sounds died down, and the thick fog from before began to dissipate, gradually fading away. The moment it faded away, the old woman's blood sprayed onto it, adding to the desolation. Wu Tilda Fairy Hong Xia didn't stay idle either. She did her best to control the primordial water. Even though she couldn't control it as well as Xiao Hua, she was still able to create small waves. The mysterious green-colored primordial water trapped the swordsman within it. Even in the turbulent primordial water, the swordsman's eyes were a little blurred. Of course, this blurriness only lasted for a moment. But just as the swordsman's eyes cleared up, a loud wong rang out from above the swordsman's head. Trembling, the swordsman felt as if his soul was about to leave his body. The swordsman turned pale with fright and hurriedly urged his secret technique to resist the attack of Xiao Hua's soul tool. Pu tilde Xiao Hua's figure suddenly flashed out from midair. It was the demon realm's concealment technique. Without hesitation, the wishful staff smashed into the head of the swordsman who was barely able to resist the attack of the soul tool toad. The last 3rd grade illusory swordsman was killed by Xiao Hua. Hu tilde Xiao Hua let out a long sigh. His figure directly fell from mid-air. Fairy Hong Xia was so scared that she didn't even have time to retract her ice phoenix body. She hurriedly flew to Xiao Hua's body and let him sit in her arms. Ari, so good. Xiao Hua smelled the fragrance of Fairy Hong Xia's hair and closed his eyes in enjoyment. To be able to kill 4 3rd-grade illusory swordsmen in succession, Xiao Hua had truly exhausted all of his true essence, and also exhausted all of his mental strength. Big brother. Xiao Mao's voice sounded at an extremely inappropriate time. Granny, can't you speak a little later? Xiao Hua almost cursed out loud. Without any other choice, Xiao Hua opened his eyes and tried his best to make his slender eyes round. An extremely bitter expression flowed in his eyes as he replied, I'm fine, it's just that my whole body is weak, I don't have a trace of cultivation. Good. Xiao Maro was frightened by Xiao Hua's eyes. He hurriedly shrunk his neck and continued to do what he was best at for the past 10 days. Xiao Maro skillfully collected the corpses of several sword cultivators that were scattered in different places, several 100 feet apart from each other. He took their flying swords and their storage pouches. Then, he picked up his broken golden arrow and poked them several times before flying back to where he came from. Okay tilde at this time, Xiao Hua could already stand firm. He clapped his hands and took out a jade slip and handed it to Xiao Mao. This is the method to control the shooting sun arrows. There is a sacrificial refining technique inside. It is a secret technique passed down by Big Brother. Remember, without Big Brother's permission, you can't pass it to others. Hurry up and refine it. In the future, don't use the shooting sun arrows as small swords and randomly poke them. You're really embarrassing the shooting sun arrows. Haha, Big Brother really has a way. Xiao Maro took the jade slip and casually stuffed the flying swords and storage bags into Xiao Hua's hands. He chuckled and extended his divine sense. Li Zongbao looked at the shooting sun arrows in Xiao Mao's hands, and a trace of envy appeared on his face. He already knew the process of Xikong Yu's death from Xiao Mao, and also knew the origin of the broken golden arrow from Xiao Hua. It was actually a legendary artifact, the shooting sun arrows. Junior brother Xiao tilde Li Zongbao opened his mouth and said, this sword cultivator should be cultivating flying swords. How can he control our Dao sect's artifacts? Especially the shooting sun arrows? Haha, it's not that special. Xiao Hua stretched and explained, actually, in the records of the Huan Kingdom, sword cultivators don't use flying swords, but swords. Bows, flying swords, treasured swords, etc. can all be made into swords. Weapon cultivators are a branch of sword cultivators. It's just that sword cultivators nowadays are competing with our Dao sect. Using flying swords is the orthodox way of sword cultivators, and using other swords is like a wild fox. The Flat Mountain Sword Sect can be considered one of the more famous sword sects in the Huan Kingdom. They have both weapon cultivators and sword cultivators in their sect. And this Sikong Yu can be considered a sword cultivator, and he can also be considered a weapon cultivator. Oh, I understand. Li Zongbao nodded. So sword cultivators also have so many strange things. Not only that, Xiao Hua said again, I also saw the inscription armor in a sword cultivator's jade slip. Inscription armor? What's that? Li Zongbao was slightly stunned. You don't know? Xiao Hua was even more stunned. Li Zongbao shook his head. I don't know. So it's like that. Since you don't know, just pretend I didn't say anything. Xiao Hua didn't explain further. The Utopia faction was a famous Dao sect in the Meng Kingdom. It was better to let Li Zongbao know less about Confucian cultivators. Seeing that Xiao Hua didn't say anything, Li Zongbao didn't ask anymore. He looked at the corpses on the ground and felt bitter. He had never felt that. He was so incompetent. These third-grade illusory swordsmen were all killed by Xiao Hua personally. Fairy Hong Xia's innate primordial water could also help from the side. He and Xiao Maro were purely spectators. What should we do next? Li Zongbao looked at Xiao Hua helplessly. Sword cultivators seem to be very interested in your divine sword secret manual. No matter how many you kill, they will still find you. I'm afraid the four of us are now famous in the Huan Kingdom, Xiao Hua sneered. Even if there are people who aren't interested in the so-called divine sword secret manual, they will be interested in the four of us. Fine. I don't want to play with them anymore. If they come, we'll leave. Can't we just hide? How do we hide? Fairy Hong Xia kept her ice phoenix body and frowned. We're already in the depths of the Huan Kingdom. No matter where we go, there will be sword cultivators from the Huan Kingdom. There's nowhere to run. Why do we have to run? Xiao Hua curled his lips and pointed to a place not far away. There seem to be many caves in the mountain peak over there. We'll just go there. There. Fairy Hong Xia didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I know that saying. The most dangerous place is the safest place. But there's no place to hide. Sword cultivators can see us with a sweep of their divine sense. Let's go. How can we be discovered by others if we follow this Xiao? Xiao Hua waved his hand and flew up. Where was the slightest bit of depleted true essence? Li Zongbao, Xiao Maro, and Fairy Hong Xia didn't know what Xiao Hua was up to. But the current Xiao Hua was the absolute master of the four of them. What else could they say? Xiao Hua very naturally brought the three of them and flew for several li. There were a few mountain ranges here and there were a few blue waves rippling in the ice and snow. Xiao Hua only paused in midair for a moment before flying to the bottom of one of the mountain ranges. Beside an unremarkable mountain rock, there was a cave as tall as a person. Senior brother Li, please wait a moment. After Xiao Hua landed, he said calmly. With a clap of his hand, several puppets came out from the space and rushed into the cave one by one. These are puppets? Li Zongbao's eyeballs fell out again. He knew better than anyone else how rare these puppets were. Some fortuitous encounters in the early years. Xiao Hua's cultivation was getting higher and higher. There were fewer places where he used puppets. Naturally, he gradually forgot about that cultivator called Mo Qingyuan. -11. Chapter 2776. Words written before 10 a.m. The story of the Cultivation God was uploaded on January 6, 2010. It has been 4 years since then. The third place didn't dare to comment on the story of the Cultivation God, But the results of the cultivation god were obvious to all. Using Chidyen's words, it was a flop. Actually, this result was already known to the third place in 2010. The story of the cultivation god was signed as a collaboration at the very beginning. It could be said that it was a temporary job for Chidyen. Afterwards, the third place always applied to sign a contract, but the reply was always, your work is not up to the standard of signing a contract, please continue to work hard. It was the same for 30,000, 60,000, 200,000. In the end, the third place didn't even apply anymore. Just like that, until September 2010, the story of the cultivation god had reached 1.2 million words. Finally, the editor sent me a message saying that I could sign the contract. As for why I signed the contract, it wasn't because the story of the cultivation god was outstanding, but because it was too long. In addition, at that time, many novels had already been signed. I also tried to send a message to the editor on QQ. Although he didn't reply, he still saw it. Because of the hard work of the third place, I signed the contract. After signing the contract, there was a long wait. The editor told me that if it couldn't be published in December, then I should consider stopping and start another book. But the third place clearly remembered that at that time, the third place unhesitatingly replied, I must finish the book, even if it can't be published. Afterwards, in order to get it published, the third place specially compared the pros and cons of other xianxia novels and sent it to the editor. Finally, in December, the 1.5 million words The Story of the Cultivation God was published. Others strongly promoted it, but the third place didn't. Rumor has it that it was a consolation, but the third place didn't understand. The third place only knew that he could finally receive money, because for an entire year, the third place received less than 200 yuan. Chidyen didn't even send him money. As for the number of subscriptions for the story of the cultivation god, the third place can't remember. It should be in the single digits, or under 30. In short, it was embarrassing, because when the first volume of the story of the cultivation god ended, the number of subscriptions was only around 120. After another year, under the third place's efforts, the story of the cultivation god finally ended. According to the third place's thoughts, it should be a new book called Light Tracing. It was a pity that Tanhua was considered a veteran author and should have enjoyed the privilege of directly sending it to the editor via QQ. However, the new editor had to send it via QQ email. Alright, Tanhua knew that Tanhua wasn't a famous author, so she used her email. In the end, the editor sent an email a week later. Tanhua remembered clearly that the editor didn't agree to continue writing this story after the legend of the cultivation god. Furthermore, the editor thought, for the readers, there isn't enough immersion, and the story as a whole doesn't have anything that can immediately grab their attention. Everyone writes xianxia novels, so why should the readers read your new book that doesn't have any special features and highlights? Were they going to rely entirely on their old readers? My personal suggestion is to write a new book. Design the beginning of the story well. -11. Chapter 2777. Of course, I know that the editor's suggestion is pertinent. I really am not that kind of genius writer. I can't write a hot-blooded story. After fighting for it again, the editor said, if you want to write it, then upload it. Alas, in fact, the third place just wants a chance to be signed internally. The third place thinks that this is nothing for the third place who has 4 million words of the story of the cultivation god. The editors have their reasons. They see the pulse of the market. In terms of market trends, it is right. At the same time, it is also good for the third place. But the third place wants to write his own story, so there is the second part of the story of the cultivation god. From January 2012 to today, there are more than 4 million words. Now, it is the #1 xianxia book on Chidyen. If the third place listens to the editor, there will not be the second part of the story of the cultivation god. The third place is really long-winded. Many people will not read the rest after reading the beginning. But the readers who persevered will read it several times and can't put it down. Especially today, the fourth leader flowing falling flowers appeared. It shows that the third place book is still acceptable. Speaking of the four leaders, the first one is naturally to thank Xiao Kao Shun. When the third place was sick the year before, she was promoted to the leader. This made the third place very grateful and persevered again. The next one to thank is naturally Piao Yixian and Shayuan. Both of them were promoted to the leader last year and supported the third place a lot. The day before yesterday, when the third place was chatting with Big Hammer and said that he was a little depressed, Flowing Falling Flowers became the leader. This really made the third place emotional. This is the encouragement given to the third place. The third place can't let down the love of the heavens and the readers, so he doesn't dare to give up easily. Since we are talking about gratitude, Helpless, Big Hammer, Rolling Wood and Stone is Mine, Holding Plum and Smelling Flowers, Lost Ice Spring, Guitar Arbo, Life is Full of Surprises, Extreme Sky Strange Clouds, Little Crucian Carp, Everyday SY Guy and so on also need to be thanked. In particular, Big Hammer spared no effort to promote the story of the cultivation god, which made the third place very moved. In addition, there are many readers who are not listed, such as rewards, monthly votes, recommendation votes, and subscriptions. The third place expressed his gratitude. Because, I can't list one by one, otherwise, this chapter will be charged. Haha, the third place is a little long-winded again. Actually, what the third place wanted to say was that it was very difficult for the third place to write a book. After all, the third place was not a full-time writer. It had always been an amateur writer. In order to guarantee the minimum remuneration and to cope with the unknown interruptions, the third place always left a lot of leeway. Furthermore, the novel was neither too fast nor too slow, neither too fast nor too slow. Coupled with the slow development of the story, the third place lost many readers. This was not the fault of the book friends. It was the fault of the third place winner. Therefore, from today onwards, the third place winner decided to get excited and challenge himself. In the future, he would upload as much as he could write every day and use the word count to make up for the slow development of the plot. Moreover, the current Xiao Hua was already at the stage of accumulating strength. Let's see how Xiao Hua would laugh proudly in the Dawn Rain continent, challenge nascent soul and demigod realm experts, and leave behind an immortal legend in the Dawn Rain continent. Blowing the horn of battle, all readers come to witness and follow the starting point of the story of the cultivation god in 2014 tilde. -11. Chapter 2778. Li Zongbao smacked his lips and didn't know how to continue the conversation. Well, it's an opportunity from the early years. With the strength of the utmost happiness faction, even his master, Heng, didn't have any puppets. Even among the nascent soul stage masters that Li Zongbao knew, there were only a few who had puppets. But Xiao Hua took out a few puppets at once. Although Li Zongbao had told himself countless times that he wasn't surprised, he still couldn't help but mutter a few words. After an hour, a few more puppets jumped out from the cave. Xiao Hua put them away and said with a smile, "Everyone, please, the rest of the matter will be handled by the famous Xiao Hua personally." Fairy Hong Xia and the others didn't understand what Xiao Hua was doing, so they could only follow his instructions and enter the cave. The cave wasn't big, but after passing through the cave entrance, there was a huge space below. It was the work of the puppets just now. Xiao Hua stayed outside the cave and covered up the traces left behind by the four people. Only then did he carefully fly into the cave and cast out the capital star array's spirit talismans one by one, covering the entire space. When Xiao Hua formed a seal with his hands, the entire space disappeared. Even the entrance of the small cave turned into the same as the surrounding stone walls. Sensing the fluctuations of the array, Li Zongbao and the others released their divine senses. Seeing that the array was so tight that their divine senses couldn't penetrate, the three of them sighed again. At this time, no one spoke. This Xiao Hua, except for giving birth, he knew everything. If the three of them hadn't followed Xiao Hua on this trip to the Huan Kingdom, they wouldn't have known that Xiao Hua, in addition to his cultivation level, could also transform into a sword, had the soul-slaying vital light to kill people, spiritual fire, jade talismans, demonic weapons, soul tools. Any one of these secret techniques was already shocking enough, but Xiao Hua actually took them out in an orderly manner. Every secret technique he took out could reap the life of a grade 3 illusory swordsman. Li Zongbao finally understood why Xiao Hua didn't dare to let others discover his true cultivation level, and why he didn't make a move. Once he made a move, he would kill them all. Just in time. Xiao Hua looked at the stunned three people and smiled. Taking advantage of this leisure time, I'll refine Senior Brother Li's spiritual tool. Senior Martial Brother Li is so powerful, it's really a pity that you don't have a magic treasure. Even though Li Zongbao's heart was as calm as an ancient well, he still blushed a little when he heard those words. Of course, Li Zongbao also believed that Xiao Hua was purely speaking without any intention of ridicule. However, before the great battle of Dao and Sword, Li Zongbao's notion of being number one below core formation had long since transformed into smoke. A kind of thought of there's always someone better than you spontaneously arose in his mind. Thank you for your trouble, Junior Brother Xiao. Li Zongbao casually said a few words and found a place to sit down. He took a pill and closed his eyes to meditate. Fairy Hong Xia and Xiao Maro also looked at Xiao Hua. They knew that there was nothing they could do to help. One of them took out God's guidance, while the other took out the sun shooting arrows jade strips. Both of them started to meditate. The shock they received was actually no less than Li Zongbao's. This was especially true for Fairy Hong Xia. The pressure she felt was not just from Xiao Hua alone. Xiao Hua had previously helped Li Zongbao refine the immortal poking whip twice. Later, due to the increasing number of sword cultivators chasing after them, he did not dare to waste his true essence to control the spiritual fire. While avoiding the sword cultivators, Xiao Hua refined the whip 7 times one by one. Of course, Xiao Hua spent nearly 100 days refining the whip 7 times. Outside the cave, there were still some fearless illusory swordsmen chasing after them. However, when they saw the corpses of the 4 third-grade illusory swordsmen, most of them gave up the idea of killing them. Only 5 or 6 of them did not give up their evil intentions and continued to chase after them. However, at this time, they did not dare to act alone. Even if there were 4 of them together, they were still worried. In the end, the 5 or 6 of them gathered together. Of course, behind them, there were many second-grade and first-grade illusory swordsmen following them from afar. These swordsmen did not dare to come close. They seemed to be the disciples of the third-grade illusory swordsmen or other disciples of the Sword Gate who wanted to take advantage of the situation. These swordsmen ignored the cave where Xiao Hua and the others were hiding. Even if some sword cultivators used their divine sense to scan the area, they would not be able to find the 3 people inside the capital star array. On this day, after Xiao Hua sacrificed the last 9 drops of blood essence to produce a thin blood shadow, Xiao Hua once again muttered and pointed his finger at the immortal piercing whip that was floating in the air. A blood-red little person scuttled out from the immortal piercing whip. This little person had a nose and eyes, and it somewhat resembled Li Zongbao. Quick! Xiao Hua pointed at the thin blood shadow again. The blood shadow rushed into the little person with a whoosh. Suddenly, the little person emitted a thick blood-red light. Big Brother Li, sit down, don't resist. Xiao Hua looked at Li Zongbao, who was beside him, and said in a low voice. Oh, okay. Li Zongbao thought that everything was done. He did not expect that Xiao Hua still had other instructions. Therefore, he did not dare to neglect and sat cross-legged beside Xiao Hua. After Li Zongbao sat down, Xiao Hua extended his left thumb and slowly pressed it between Li Zongbao's eyebrows. Whoosh! A sound like flowing water came from the place where the thumb touched. A sapphire blue light blossomed along with Xiao Hua's thumb. Looking at Li Zongbao's expression again, the moment the light blossomed, it slightly stagnated and then returned to normal. Xiao Hua's hand drew an arc in the air. That sapphire blue light fell like a meteor into the blood-red little person in the air. Pu. As if a candle was lit, a sapphire blue flame appeared in the blood-red little person's body. Following the burning of the flame, wisps of faint smoke rushed into the air. The blood-red color of the little person's body dimmed along with the faint smoke. In less than the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the little person had become transparent. However, the more transparent the little person was, the more obvious the outline of the human figure was. Go. Finally, Xiao Hua released his soul thread again and sent the little person into the immortal poking whip. Whoosh. The moment the little person entered the immortal poking whip, a sapphire blue light like a clear spring appeared at the tip of the immortal poking whip and quickly flowed towards the entire immortal poking whip. POW, 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 POW tilde. It sounded like beans being fried. Runes began to peel off the surface of the immortal piercing whip. As the rune disappeared, more and more runes appeared one after another, layer after layer, like bamboo shoots sprouting from the ground. Immediately, a sapphire blue light filled the entire space. When the runes reached the end of the immortal piercing whip, a loud buzzing sound was emitted from the immortal piercing whip. The sapphire blue light abruptly retracted from one end of the immortal piercing whip and rapidly surged to the other end. Whoosh! Without waiting for the light to flow to the other end, the light at the tip of the whip suddenly rushed out of the immortal poking whip and rushed into the stone walls of the space. It pierced through the capital star formation's defense and rushed into the sky outside the cave. Spirit tool. Heavenly omen. Xiao Hua's body tensed up. He felt the sword origin in his body rapidly circulating. The Dream Slayer and Mountain Splitter were about to come out of his body. Xiao Hua couldn't help but groan. The sapphire blue brilliance shot several hundred feet high before falling back down. After the brilliance of the immortal piercing whip flashed 9 times, the entire brilliance was suddenly restrained within the immortal piercing whip. There was no longer any movement. However, Li Zongbao, who had already opened his eyes, already felt that the immortal poking whip had an indescribable connection with him. He seemed to be the immortal poking whip and the immortal poking whip seemed to be him. Although he didn't make any hand seals, as long as he willed it, the immortal poking whip would definitely attack according to his will. Good. Seeing this, Xiao Hua clapped his hands and said, "The spirit tool is done. Senior Marshal Brother Li, as long as you nourish it with your primordial spirit, the spirit inside the spirit tool will sprout and gradually grow. In the future, my hard work will all depend on Senior Marshal Brother Li." Then, Xiao Hua scanned with his divine sense again and said with a bitter smile, "This spirit tool has only just been refined, but it can actually break my formation. If Senior Marshal Brother Li successfully nourishes it in the future, what kind of power will it have? Little brother is looking forward to it." He tilde. Li Zongbao let out a rare laugh. "This is all thanks to Junior Marshal Brother Xiao. My immortal poking whip has seen the light of day again." As he spoke, Li Zongbao held the immortal poking whip in his hand. However, seeing that it was already completely different from the previous immortal poking whip, he laughed again and said, "This immortal poking whip is no longer the immortal poking whip. Junior Marshal Brother Xiao, what do you think this spirit tool should be called? Previously, it was a magic tool that could kill one person with poke. Now that it is a spirit tool, one whip can kill several people, dozens of people, or even hundreds of people. Why don't we call it the immortal killing whip?" Xiao Hua said after thinking for a while. "Okay, let's do as Junior Marshal Brother Xiao says." Li Zongbao said happily, "This thing will be called the immortal killing whip in the future. I can, but don't tell Senior Marshal Uncle Heng Ming that this is little brother's work." Xiao Hua nodded. Of course. Li Zongbao wanted to say something, but Xiao Hua's expression suddenly changed. Without waiting for him to say anything, Xiao Hua said to Fairy Hongxia, "Hurry up and leave. There are swords chasing after us." "What? Swords?" Fairy Hongxia and Xiao Maro turned pale with fright. They knew that they were definitely not a match for swords. If they stayed here, they would only be a burden to Xiao Hua. They immediately flew up from the ground and rushed out of the space. Fairy Hongxia was still transmitting her voice to Xiao Hua, telling him the location of the meeting. "Senior Marshal Brother Li, you should go too." Seeing that Li Zongbao was hesitating, Xiao Hua urged, "The weapon spirit of the immortal killing whip is not formed yet, you can't help me much. Why don't you go and protect Xiao Maro and Fairy Hongxia? I'll leave the two of them to you." "Okay. Even if I have to give up my life, I will ensure their safety." Li Zongbao knew that this was not the time to hesitate. He swung the immortal killing whip and chased after Fairy Hongxia and Xiao Maro without looking back. 11. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.